Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 240. So glad you could join me. Today's guest, George Bilgere, is here. He'll be with us in about 5 or 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do too. So please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this after the fact. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. That's all we ask of you. It's always free here at Rattle, like almost everything we do. And like we always start out with, we're going to start with today's Poets Respond poet, or this week's Poets Respond poet, I should say, and that's Ryan McCarty. And he has an eclipse poem, of course, which is the big topic of the week. And here he is, Ryan McCarty. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. And it was one of those weeks where I thought we'd probably get some eclipse poems, and we definitely did. It's really one of those topics that brings people together. And so a lot of people write about it. And you were no exception, a great poem. And that was kind of what your poem was about. How did you go about writing it? What was the entry point for you?
Well, like you said, people were talking about it and they've been talking about it for a really long time, sort of nonstop. And I was waiting for the bus to go into work one morning and I was reading a bit. And what put me over the top was this Red Cross piece about this sort of like almost like Walking Dead post-apocalyptic, like people are going to run out of gas and they're going to run out of food and you're going to be traveling and beware, like this sort of. And I was like, oh, that's it, I've got to do it. And then I scribbled down that a form of those last couple lines, and then when I got on the bus I kind of like worked backwards from there.
hmm And so, were you around for the last eclipse? I mean, obviously you were alive, but did you write any poems? Were you actively doing that? And did that? Because we had some great eclipse poems. What was it, 7 years ago too? Is it something that you've thought about writing before, or is this sort of a new entry into eclipses?
I was outside for the last one, but I had really small kids at the time, so like my poems were running around barefoot at the moment.
Uh-huh.
And so I remember thinking about it a lot. But this time I had maybe a little bit more headspace to do it. So a lot of the details from this one were sort of my memories of there.
hmm Well, let's hear the poem, and we'll talk a little bit more. And this poem was, "What will we see when the lights go out?" So go ahead and read it.
Okay, thanks. What will we see when the lights go out? My neighbor near me on the bus moves his lips while looking at his phone. They're like two little birds whispering to that tiny sunrise he holds. He'll finish, snap out, look up, and laugh with me at the empty roads. I know it because we're speeding reckless in the wide open streets. The whole world flew south to find a place to watch one unimaginably distant body come between us and another even more distant body. If we believe the old stories, they're men and women, our mother dancing, shielding us, hiding our father's glare. If we believe the new stories, roads will turn to parking lots and children will forget the names of their families, wandering lost in a sea of empty gas stations and dehydration. If we believe only the story that something inevitable is happening, we will marvel at the precision, at our predictive powers, at the blurred lines between chirping crickets and the notifications ringing in our pants. Or, instead, on the roads, in our yards, high behind windows built for silence, ludicrous in our magical glasses, could we just lose the tale? Know what the end might look like? In the momentary darkness, fumbling for our offerings to coax the daytime back, our multi-tools and battery-powered radios, our spare cash and backup maps, will we breathe in that chill air when everything purples, when the birds change key, when millions of us look not to the sky but left and right and see each other, gone out of our way to stand together where the light disappears?
Yeah, such a great poem by Ryan McCarty. That was "What Will We See When the Lights Go Out?" And so you wrote that before the actual eclipse. How much of the actual experience was like that? Was it similar to what you imagined?
I remember like my son and I were together when the actual eclipse happened this time, he was like, "Oh, the light purples. I get it." And he was walking. He's 13. He was walking from school to sort of meet me downtown, and he swears he heard an owl just as it was all like sort of beginning to get dark. And he's like, "Yeah, the birds were crazy." So there were things about that like that I remember from from the one 6 years ago or whatever it was.
Hmm. Yeah, well, for us it was similar. We're really close to where here in the Woodlands, Texas, to where the full totality. But then it was a deep, deep cloudy day. And what I didn't realize is that if it's cloudy, it like lights up the clouds everywhere, and it doesn't even really get dark, even though we're really close to where it was fully dark. We were going to drive there, which is why we're doing a Tuesday night show. We were going to go like an hour or two west to Austin to be in the fullness. But even so, it like all neighbors came out to the park we were in, and people were sort of sipping their wine, drinking cocktails, taking selfies, and sort of everybody had a little fun with the fact that it was like literally nothing. It was like the clouds got a little darker if they were a little thicker for a moment, and then we went inside. But it was still some kind of a little communal experience too. So it was a lot of fun, just like your poem said, which was interesting.
Yeah, we had that too, where there was like I don't know, people didn't plan, or capitalism failed us. There weren't enough glasses, the special magic glasses to go around, so people were standing outside, sort of like passing them along between like strangers. There would be,
That's great. Yeah.
some sort of a elderly lady handing some to some kids down the way, and then their aunt was taking them or whatever. And I really love that too. It kind of resonated with that last part. We're looking at each other rather than this thing happening far away.
Yeah, it's really great. I heard too, Aaron Murphy, who's going to be on in a few weeks as the guest, was landed at an airport and had a box of those glasses and was handing them out to people at the airport, and they were all looking up together. So a lot of great scenes like that around the world. Looking forward to maybe some more poems too about that topic. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. It's a positive poem, another fun one to look at. Thanks for sharing it.
Thanks so much, Tim. Have a good night.
Yep, take care. It was Ryan McCarty with this Sunday's poem. Once again, that was What Will We See When the Lights Go Out? And now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, George Bilgere. So sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is the great George Bilgere. George, his wife, and two exceptionally fine little boys spend school in Cleveland, Ohio, because living in Cleveland builds character, he says. I love this bio from the back of the book. In the summers, the family heads off to Berlin, Germany, where the kids study German, while George does important research on beer gardens. He's the author of 8 collections of poetry and shows no signs of slowing down. You can find all of his work at the newly redesigned website, georgebilgere.com. And here he is, George Bilgere. Hey, George, good to see you again.
Hey, Tim, good to be back. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's really fun, especially, after we worked so much together on this new book, which I should hold up, The Cheap Motels of My Youth. Wonderful. Congratulations again on winning the Chapbook Prize. But it was really fun putting this book together. You're a great author to work with, I should say, too. You liked everything I did, which is always is always helpful.
And I don't know if all your viewers realize, do you design all the covers yourself?
Yeah, pretty much. Occasionally, the author has a friend who wants to design it, and we kind of let it go.
Yeah.
So we did. I think I've done like all but one, I think.
your design, all of your designs are fantastic. But I love what you did, because I was coming up with these obvious cliched ideas like, well, let's take a picture of a cheap looking hotel. But that tilted lamp, the lamp on the table with the tilted shade, says everything about that kind of hotel. And you reduced it to a single powerful image, which as soon as I saw that, I said, yes, that's the cover.
Well, that's great. And the trick to that is just iterating. I sent you like a dozen, but I said, this is our favorite. And then you agreed, which was the nice thing. The trouble is when the author doesn't agree, and then you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what we're doing. One of the ones, the last time with Arthur Russell, it was me driving through. I paid for a car wash just to drive through and like take some pictures of the inside so I could make the inside of the car wash. Yeah, he liked it at the end. Yeah, but he was like, I couldn't find any photos of anybody, like who takes photos of a car inside the car wash. And so there were none that I could find. Like professional photographers don't do that. So I got my little iPhone camera out or whatever and drove through, paid my $8.50 for the sake of Rattle, and got a clean car out of it for a little while.
Man, that's impressive sacrifice.
It is. It's dedication. It really
for your art.
Exactly. Well, let's start out with one of the poems, George. Do you want to start with a title poem? I think
I'm going to start with the title poem called "Cheap Motels of My Youth," and I'm probably a little bit older than a lot of your viewers, but back in the day, back when I was a heck of a lot younger and I'd just gotten my degree, and I was going on the market looking for a teaching job, which is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to have to do. And you drive out or you fly out to all these schools and you get examined and you do your best to try to get this job. And I mean, everything is on the line. You don't have any money. You're inexperienced in the ways of the world. And you end up staying in the cheapest possible motel that you can budget. And this poem is about those pre-job days of my life. It's called Cheap Motels of My Youth. They lay somewhere between the sleeping in the car era and my current and probably final era, the Best Western or Courtyard Marriott era. The wigwam, log cabin, cozy comfort, highway house, starlight, the lazy A, just off the interstate, the roar of the 16-wheelers all night long, the dented tin door opening to the parking lot, the broken Coke machine muttering to itself. Color TV, free HBO, hang yourself in our spacious closets. A job interview at some lost in the middle of nowhere branch campus of some agricultural college devoted to the research and development of the soybean and related byproducts. 5-course teaching load, 4 of them remedial comp. Candidate must demonstrate familiarity with the basic tenets of Christian faith. Chance of getting the job, 1 in 100. Lip-sticked cigarette butt under the bed. Toilet seat with its paper band, sanitized for your protection. Dead roach floating in the bowl. As the free HBO flickers in the background, you stare in the cracked mirror at a face too young, too full of hope to deserve this. And you wait for the Courtyard Marriott era to arrive. And thank God it did. I mean, I am now at that level, Courtyard Marriott. I don't think I'll ever go any higher, but it's exceeded my expectations.
Well, I think I'm still at the the log cabin era.
You're still at the wigwam?
Yeah, exactly. To me, it was Motel 6 that I think of. When I was thinking about your covers and the title, I was thinking about,
oh my God,
those road trips through Motel 6. Yeah.
I've stayed at a million Motel 6s. We'll leave the light on.
Well, what was it about this that made you make it the title poem of the chapbook? Was there a reason for Cheap Motels of My Youth? Because it's wonderfully sort of a slant from the general topic, I'd say.
Yeah. I think because that was kind of like the beginning of my career as a teacher, and I was just starting to publish poems, and it was the beginning of being serious about being a writer and a teacher and looking to enter the profession. I'd been a grad student for like forever, and that was a life I loved, but like all good things, it had to come to an end. So Cheap Motels of My Youth to me signals kind of a jumping off point from eternal youth to, oh my God, you better get a job and you better start taking this seriously if you're going to get anywhere. So that was my tribute to those dumpy little places I stayed at all over the country while looking for work. So it seemed like an appropriate way to launch, the rest of the poems.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, which have the theme of looking back. But it seems like you have so much fun with your poems, and they're fun to read because of that. I imagine you sort of sitting at your desk writing and just amusing yourself as you're writing these, and in poems from Central Air and other books. Is that the case? Is it, or is it sort of an act that you're performing, that you're having so much joy in the process of writing? Because it's really easy to imagine sitting there and cracking yourself up and having fun, and then thinking about life, and I think we get some of that pleasure out of it too.
No, it's not an act. I really feel. If I'm smiling or laughing while writing the poem, who is it who uttered the immortal sort of, I guess now a cliche about writing, and I can't think of his name. He said, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. And if what I'm writing surprises me if it's sheer craziness or wackiness surprises me into laughing, I know the poem is going to work. But if I'm just sitting there and it's a slog and it's kind of glum and serious, some sort of death march to the end of the poem, I know it's going to be dead on arrival. So those poems where I am laughing as I write it, or at least, I usually write in cafes. I don't want to look like a lunatic. But those poems where I know that sense of fun is there, those are the ones that work for me. Billy Collins said he likes poems that are up to some mischief, and I'm the same way. I love a poem that has its stated agenda, but over on the side there's someone chuckling, and that's what I'm always working for.
Yeah, well, it really works in this book. Let's hear another poem.
I'm going to read the first poem of the book. It's called 9. And it seemed like the right way to start out the book. It's about being 9. And in the poem, I struggle. I have 2 little kids. One of them is now 11, but I remember when he was 9. The poem is an effort to capture the mindset of being 9. And like a lot of my poems, it plays around with time. The shifting malleability and mystery of time. So, 9. I'm standing by the pop machine at the gas station, drinking a root beer. It cost a dime, my whole allowance. My bike, a J.C. Higgins 3-speed, looks cool. I just washed it and waxed the blue fenders. Grown-ups are moving around me in kind of a fog. Actually, I feel sorry for grown-ups with their neckties, their dark jackets, and serious talk. I am wearing low-top Keds. Their shoes are hard and gigantic. Try climbing a tree in those shoes. How am I supposed to know that an old white-haired guy, a grown-up, is watching me from his desk in the future, writing down every move I make? Why would anybody even do that? If there's one thing I don't like, it's writing and division. This root beer is actually excellent. It's a hot day. My fenders are waxed.
Yeah, that was the poem 9 from Cheap Motels of My Youth by George Bilgere. And I just love the way time moves in that poem. Thinking about the whole thing as malleable, it makes me think of the way that there have been some studies where if you show people pictures of themselves older, like, through computer technology, how they would look when they're older, they could look at themselves. They'll go and make better investments in the future, make better choices about like diet and exercise and things like that. Yeah. And we sort of forget the fact that we're like the same person, but a different person. Like we're not kind. A lot of times we're not as kind to ourselves as we are other people, because we forget that we're like the future self is another self that we should take care of too. And I love the way that the poem moves through time in that way and makes you think about that. What was it? What did you think your life would be like at 9? Do you remember that? Can you envision or remember what you might have envisioned at that point?
I don't think I had any sense of the future, Tim. I think that consciousness, I observed it in my own 9-year-old. Near the end of the poem, I say, if there's one thing I don't like, it's writing and division. And then the next line is, this root beer is actually excellent. So I think for a 9-year-old, everything is at the same level. You're not prioritizing. I've got to think important thoughts about the future. Thinking about your academic likes and the quality of root beer, they're exactly at the same level. Everything is just flattened out. And you haven't yet reached that time in life when you say, oh man, I got to address the big issues like the future. I don't think I ever thought about what I do until I was, 13, 14, elderly. Mm-hmm. How about you? Did you have a sense of what you'd be doing when you were 9 years old?
I don't think so. I think that was in the architect phase, maybe. I like to make building with Legos, making houses and things like that, and like drawing little blueprints. A little did I know that whole career would be like pretty much taken over by, technology. But yeah, so a little bit, but not really. And I think too, like there's a way that, like you said, it all flattens out. Like the summers seem to be like their own epochs, and now the kids are, home from school for the summer, and it's like, it feels like 2 weeks and it's over and they're back to school already. And like, where did that summer go? It's the difference in the way time moves, across time, when we aren't thinking about the future and the past so much, and we're just living in the moment. It just stretches out to eternity. Those summers lasted forever in such a great way at 9 years old. That's the thing I think of.
Absolutely. Do you remember that feeling of being in 3rd grade or 4th grade, and that would be the last day of school, the last day of June, and the summer, 3 months, an inconceivable eternity. You knew it could never end, and it did last forever. But I agree with you. Now I watch my kids zoom through it, and it frightens me how quickly it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So last time you talked about, it was actually, I was looking back at the episode to make sure we didn't talk about all the same stuff as last time. And it was
the same show.
Yeah. And it was about 4 weeks, I think, after the pandemic, episode number 38 you were on. And you were talking at the time about how much you were actually enjoying the lockdown phase because you got to spend so much time with your family. And it made me wonder, how has it been, 4 years on or 3 years on after that? To have you changed some of the behaviors, and have you sort of kept some of the things you learned you really enjoyed from the pandemic, or afterward was it sort of reverting back to the mean?
Yeah, reverting back to my crude former self. Well, first of all, that's a pretty funny comment. I commented on how much I was enjoying the pandemic. I guess I probably did, but you're not supposed to say that, right? And I understand it was a terrible thing.
Yeah. Well, I was too, though. I was having a great time, like going for hikes. A
lot of us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, it changed me, I think, permanently in the sense that, as you know, everything slowed down. Everything nearly stopped. Well, really, it did stop. And once we got into April, the shutdown happened in March. By the time we were in mid-April, like about now, and then May, June, I I would go out into the backyard with a book and my comfortable lawn chair, my coffee in the morning, my wine in the evening. I spent almost the entire pandemic in the backyard reading, looking at birds. I think, like a lot of Americans, I became an amateur birder. I bought a book, I live in Cleveland, Ohio, birds of northeastern Ohio. I learned a lot about birds. I spent a lot of time just kind of gazing off into the sky. And I slowed everything down. And I don't think even now I've returned to I tended before that to be a bit manic, a bit like, how many things can you get done in a single day? That all slowed down for me. And I'm still like that. I love going outside in the evening and just watching the sun go down. So I learned to value my time and my time with my kids in a way that I don't think I ever would have if the pandemic hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about the ways things have changed and enjoying that time. I mean, we hiked a lot. That was the thing I loved. I say a great time is because every day, because we had nothing else to do, we wanted to make exercise. I took them on a hike and we went through all the trails in our mountain town, which, I'd been on myself, but hadn't taken the kids, and they sort of built up the stamina to go up these like steep mountains and things. And we had all these long talks, and to the point where now we love hiking. And I think that gave us the love of that, and is a way that we can really connect too, because we have these like long, deep conversations. Right now they're 13 and 9, and it's real highlight. And it's been because of that. I don't think we would have done that to that extent anyway. Yeah.
Same thing happened to us. We would go out into the country, or we'd go to one of our local parks and walk in the park or hike in the country, talk. I mean, we had nothing but time, right? And those parents who might ordinarily have been completely caught up in their jobs were suddenly at home with the whole day with the kids, and it created a bond with my kids that I never had with my parents, and for that I'm really grateful. Mm-hmm. And it's still there.
Yeah, and a lot of that's come out, in these poems too. Well, let's hear another one. I think maybe it's Avocados is a good one.
Okay, Avocados is a good poem to read if we're talking about time, because this is all about, in a way, the difference between grown-up perception of time and kid perception of time. Avocados. My son comes into the kitchen and asks if he can have an avocado. Avocado, he says, loving the weight of each green syllable on his tongue. Avocados represent an immense step for him, an evolutionary leap far beyond the narrow confines of cornflakes, wherein he has dwelt for so long. The breast, the cornflake, the avocado, such has been his journey thus far. You'll have to wait until they're ripe, I tell him. Want some cornflakes instead? No thanks, he says, and wanders back into the world of being 5. While I'm doing the dishes at this point, I start thinking about ripening and how glad I am that it takes time, and his own ripening will be years in the making. Years, I say aloud, enjoying that long, luxurious syllable like a cat stretching out on my tongue. As Michael comes in again, it's been 5 minutes, and asks, "Are they ripe yet?" "No, not quite yet. Want some cornflakes in the meantime?" "That's okay," he says. "I'll wait."
That's great. Yeah.
So he's going to stand there for 2 weeks. Are they ready? Are they ready?
Yeah, it's sort of a way to do an "Are we there yet?" poem in a totally different way, and then with a totally different twist too at the end. And it's one of those poems, you do this a lot, George. We noticed where you have this one word title, where the meaning of that word evolves throughout the poem. And I think that a great example is that palimpsest poem, which won, I should say, congratulations to since the last show and winning the Reader's Choice Award from our contest. But that palimpsest, you know what the word means, or maybe you look it up if you don't. I think I probably had to the first time I came across the poem. But and then it means something else by the time the poem ends. So it becomes like this cut, like in a haiku or something, where you have this leap between the title and the poem itself, even though it looks sort of on its surface like it's just gonna be a simple, oh, this is a poem about avocados, and then it changes the way it does that, throughout the poem. How do you go about titling poems? Because your titles are just great, and a lot of times that's one of the things you do, but there are other great titles too. Do you remember, like in that or in palimpsest, where the title came from? What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, the titles always come later. I've heard of poets who start with the title. I think that's kind of an interesting idea because, you are always offering your readers poetry challenges. And one really short, brief prompt is to say to a writer, here's your prompt, avocados. What are you going to do with it? But I don't do that. I write the poem and then I look through it and I think, what would work as a title here? That poem, palimpsest, I dimly knew what that word meant. And I picked that title after I had written the poem. But it has to do with, old painters back in the Renaissance, impoverished painters they'd do a canvas. And if they didn't really like it or think it was very successful, they didn't have enough money to get a new canvas. So they'd paint over it white and then paint another image on it. And occasionally the original image would show through. And so I wrote that poem and I thought, yeah, I dimly remember that word from art history. Let's try that out. What I liked about avocados is of all the fruits and vegetables you buy, it seems avocados are the most prone to the complexities of aging and ripening. Like, I love avocados. I love them. And my wife comes home with avocados. And my kids do, and I do this too. We say, I want that avocado now. But you can't have it now. It's got to be at least a week. And it's a torment. But, you bring home an orange, you can have your orange right away. Avocados require patience, aging, time. So it seemed like just the right kind of poem title for this whole exploration of my perception of time as opposed to my kids' perception of time.
Yeah, I just realized I did a haiku that I didn't realize was inspired by this poem, I think, in the subconscious, but it was for the moment ripe avocado.
Very nice.
So that's the thing, too. You only get a little bit of time, and then you have to throw them away. So we just threw 3 away last night because we thought they were good. I had this whole taco salad lined up. It was going to be great.
Oh, Tim, I hate to hear.
All 3 of the avocados were not worth it. So
picturing the taco salad with the perfect avocados gone.
Yep, exactly.
Small tragedy.
It definitely is. So let's hear the next poem, George.
All right, I'll read a poem. I'll read a poem from this book, my last book before Cheap Motels. It's called Central Air. Came out a couple of years ago from Pittsburgh, and here's a poem about my mother, who grew up on a gritty, tough little farm in southern Illinois, had nothing. She was part of that generation whose lives were changed by World War II in order to have a larger life. And she ended up being stationed in Hawaii. She was briefly stationed in Japan. And she came back to St. Louis. She'd been trained as a nurse and got married and married my father, who, and this has become, anyone who reads my stuff knows it's endlessly explored. My father became a terrible alcoholic, and my mother ended up a single mom raising 3 kids in Southern California, where she relocated. But she always, even though she never finished college, she loved to read, and she loved to read the great classics. And she would come home at the end of her shift and read novels like, and it's the title of this poem, Anna Karenina. My mother was long dead before I was old enough to ask her who she was. But I'm reading for the first time Anna Karenina, which I recall her burning through late nights after a double shift, after the insertion of suppositories and the emptying of bedpans, after she fried us up some pork chops and opened a can of applesauce and a can of hominy and a can of fruit cocktail. She'd sit down with her cigarettes and red wine and read these big novels that took her away from thinking all day about money and into whatever Emma Bovary or Eleanor Dashwood was dealing with. She disappeared into French winters. She walked down London streets or sat quietly with Anna in her parlor. I look around in the novel for her cigarettes tonight, her glass of wine, anything she might have left behind. And what inspired that poem was this thought I've had before that, you know, when you read it, like, you inhabit that space, you inhabit that novel for a few days or a few weeks or a month. And the next person who reads that novel inhabits the same space, the same imaginative space. So I read that novel a couple of summers ago thinking, I'm in this drawing room with Anna Karenina, and my mom was here. My mother was sitting here in this same room with that same clock on the wall and the same fire in the fireplace. And it's kind of an eerie, chilling realization about the power of reading and imagination. So I felt a wonderful linkage with her reading this book.
Yeah, that's such an amazing thought. I mean, that's one of the things I'll probably take away from this conversation and think about all the time now. I never thought of books that way, but it is so true. I mean, it's like you're a ghost in the room and you're observing it, and then everybody else who's already read that book is a ghost there too, and you're in maybe a different dimension, but you're all there together at the same time. It's a beautiful thought. I love that. Yeah. And that's a great example of how your poems operate, I think, George, because with the humor that you have, and then the seriousness and the depth too, you never know where your poems are going to go. And I think there's something to push off against every time, because there's always this anticipation. Like, I don't know if the last line is going to be funny or like heartbreaking. In every poem, it sort of walks this line where you have this tension, you know, just in the sort of setup that a reader has knowing your work, where you could go any direction and you never know where it's going to go. Is that something that you're conscious of, like trying to vary it like that? And is that something you intentionally do? Yeah.
Completely. I mean, it's you know, another old cliche of writing. The cardinal sin of writing is to be boring. And I want my reader to be on edge and to be unsure. Like, is this guy kidding? Or is this for real? Some of my poems do that in the same poem, but certainly in a collection of poems, I don't want to strike the same. Okay, that Anna Karenina is a dark, somber poem. It is a dark, somber poem, unrelieved. I don't want my reader to have to read 45 of those in a row. I mean, that's a drag. I want my reader to go to the next poem thinking, I know this guy. I'm not sure what's going to happen here. So I've got to be on my toes rather than, all right, let's have another big, sad, lugubrious poem about your parents. I don't want to do that. I want the element of surprise. I like to ambush my readers. And to have a book of 45 poems like that, I think would be dreadful. So it varies.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Like, do
about.
you want to hear a poem that will vary from that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right, this also is from Central Air, and this poem is called it's called "The Call of the Fox." The Call of the Fox. And I don't know if you folks viewing tonight have ever heard a fox call. I never had until this summer that I allude to in the poem. The summer we rented the cottage in the woods, we would waken in the middle of the night to the mating call of the foxes. It sounds like one of my freshmen barfing up hot dogs and wild turkey after his first frat party, a sound that makes you want to puke yourself out of sympathy or sheer disgust with the whole situation. How the imperatives of desire drive us into the dark woods, sick with the incandescent longing of the flesh. However, after listening for a while, my wife remarked that it was actually kind of funny, as if nature, usually so careful about beauty, about getting it just right, had for once screwed up and created something even Mary Oliver couldn't get behind. And then she said, well, since we're up anyway, and there's nothing else to do, which is why my wife is my wife.
Yeah, that's a great
That's
poem.
a dirty poem. Yeah, thank you.
And a great ending too. Yeah, I love that idea. You said, keeping the reader on its toes. And it makes me think of in coaching Little League, and the kids are sort of crouched in this position. They were trained in T-ball to be like in that defensive crouch, and I was trying to tell them to move, always have the sense of movement, so you're on the balls of your feet as the pitch comes, then you can go left or right, and that's what you sort of force the reader to be in the poem. So it's a great analogy there, because you could go left or right, and that poem starts to go funny and then swerves all the way into the humor, where you never know if it's going to swerve back to the right, so you got to be ready to break either way as like a defender reading your poems, which just makes you also engaged more in the poems too. Like, it's a participatory feeling when you're responding and interacting with the work you do. There was a comment by Michael Meyerhofer, who was the guest just a few weeks ago, about 2 months ago. He said, where'd it go? Oh, it's up a bit. He said, "I can't overstate how much Bilgere's work has meant to me over the years. We've never met, but I honestly feel like he's one of those poets I owe a metaphysical kidney."
Oh, what a nice thing to say, Michael. Thank you.
But so that's the thing about poetry, though, is that you have, when you read other people's poems and when other people read your poems, there's such a deep connection. Like, it feels like we know you through reading your poems, especially because you write with such honesty, and that your character in the poems is so much like your character in real life. Do you think about that often, about how many people know you because of the poems?
It's a strange thing. I didn't expect this to happen. I think when poets begin, they begin with modest expectations, to say the least. And so I'm very grateful that my career has gone well, my readership has gone well, and I owe a lot to a handful of people who've helped me along the way, like Tony Hoagland and Garrison Keillor and Billy Collins. And the result is a lot of people have read my poems, and it's a curious thing. I am aware that when I'm writing, I'm supposed to sound like this is supposed to be a George Bilgere poem, and I'm aware of that, and I like that. Because I try to keep my work evolving to some degree, but at the same time, like if anyone watching this program right now, any poet, writer, you're working on establishing a voice. You're doing that thing that is so weirdly difficult. When you're talking to people in conversation, you sound like you. But when you're writing, it's really hard to sound like you. And it takes you years to get that onto the page. And once you do, people read your stuff and they think, yeah, I know this guy and I like him and I want to be in conversation with him more. So actually what you're talking about, Tim, has been the greatest satisfaction of my career as a writer. Knowing that I finally managed to get that complicated thing, a personality, to some degree on the page, and that people want to respond to that person. And I know that when the writers I like to read are people I think I'd like to sit down and have a beer with this guy or this woman. I want to know this person better. So that's sort of been the whole goal all along. I've never had a great theme. I've mostly been interested in voice, the way you sound on the page. So that's my response to that. And thanks again, Michael, for saying that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say too that you want to feel like someone that you're having beer with when you write poems, and that's something that really is so common today. There's sort of a loneliness crisis. Like we don't have the sense of community and the friendships that we used to. I don't know what, I've never looked it up, but I'm sure there's studies about how many friends you have over time, just surveys. And I bet we have like a third the friends we used to, given how things are online and we're isolated more, we're, on our phones all the time, even at the park, we don't talk to each other. And so having, a poet that you can be sort of intimate with, even though it's sort of one way, is a really nice, service to provide. And it's something that poetry can do that very few other mediums can do. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
Anything we can do. Yeah, I agree with you. I think one of the central peculiar facts about America now is that it feels like a very lonely place. And I write about that, and I think all of us are aware of what's happening with the phones and the devices and the distractions. Look, I'm in a state of terror right now, and I'll bet you are, because my kids don't have phones yet, but they're about to get them. Mm-hmm. Michael is 11, and we're saying next year. But does your 13-year-old have a phone?
Yeah, she does. And that's where she spends all the time. I mean, and you can't not do it because that's what all her friends do. She would have no contact with other friends. And the thing that and I don't know, I'm curious how many parents go to it. I'm sure it's everybody. But they don't like hang out at each other's house anymore. Like when I was 13, we lived in each other's basements. Like it was like we'd go out, I'm going out to play, and we'd end up in some kid's basement, hanging out, doing some crazy stuff, breaking things, playing video games, and we'd be back at dinner time. And now it's only parties, like birthday parties, are the only times they spend with each other. And so it's scary to me that, and you can't get them. And it's not like my daughter won't. It's that her friends don't want to either, because nobody does. It's just not part of the culture anymore at that age, which is just, I find it terrifying, to be honest.
No, I mean, I'm right there with you, and you have to give them a phone. You can't get out of it. You're trapped. And so, what do you think is what is the right year? 12, 13?
I mean, there's a year, I think, to resist as long as you can until you don't have a choice, because that's the only way they can communicate with their friends. And then not let them do any kind of, any kind of those, TikTok is like mind rot. Anything, because they have just, they choose videos based on how long you've watched the previous video. And the way the algorithm works on that, which Facebook has it now and YouTube has it with Reels, and TikTok is the one who founded it, and that is just like brain damage in your hand. So avoid that, and don't let them do that. But then after that, you have to let them interact in a way. And so, you can say no social media accounts. My daughter has a YouTube channel, which is like, I think they're a little bit better about privacy than we are, actually, because they grew up in this environment where privacy is something that's sort of hard to guard. And so all her friends do sort of anonymous videos. And so no one knows their YouTube channel, which is nice to see. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough to know what to do and how to navigate all of this.
Here's my poem about that. Okay, it's from an earlier book called Blood Pages, but it's a poem. It's a short poem called Icarus, and viewers, the story of Icarus. He and his father Daedalus had to fly out of the labyrinth, and his father built him wings made of beeswax and bird feathers, and cautioned him not to fly too high or the wax would melt and he'd plunge into the sea. And of course, Icarus, being foolish and young and headstrong, didn't listen to his dad, flew too high and plunged into the sea. This is a poem called Icarus, and Tim, it's about exactly what we're talking about. The setting is Cleveland. The lifeguard was texting. The man at the gas pump was sexting. And everybody in the park was tweeting. And the waiter at Pete's was Instagramming. And all the diners on the patio were FaceTiming, except for one old guy stuck in the past who was actually emailing. As for the people at the bus stop, they were just plain old on the phone. But the little girl at her lemonade stand on the lawn in front of her house had her head in the clouds, double parked above the town. So she was the only one who saw him fall, the beautiful boy trailing feathers from the sky above Cleveland, where basically nothing ever happens.
That's great.
So one cool thing happens in Cleveland and everyone misses it.
Well, there was a great thing today or yesterday, that eclipse. I hear you had the best view of it. So let me ask you about that too. And Monica Dovo says she was curious how Icarus will pop into that. Really, really fun the way you worked into it, George. But how was the eclipse? Because I have envy. Last time in 2017, I had so much envy for. The people living in the Pacific Northwest and had the full thing. We had this whole setup. That's why we were doing it on Tuesday. We're going to go to Austin, and then it's just total clouds and nothing. And so I don't get to have the spiritual journey into the abyss or whatever it is that I don't even know. Yeah. Was it all they it's cracked up to be?
Tim, I hate to rub it in, but it was really miraculous. And my wife and I, various friends were saying, well, let's go. I'm in Cleveland by Lake Erie. Let's go down by the lake, or let's go to this park. Let's go here. Let's go there. We finally decided we just wanted to simplify it. And so we sat in the front yard, and a few neighbors came over with wine and cheese and our glasses, of course. And man, it was one of the most extraordinary events when the minutes before totality, the eeriness of the light, the strangeness of the light, it looked like a planet. It looked like you were on a different planet. And the temperature dropped by about 10 degrees. All the birds that had been going crazy stopped as if on cue. And then right in front of our house is a street light. Totality was achieved. It got dark as night. And the moment that happened, the street light went on. Mm-hmm. It was as if a signal that it had been achieved. And we sat there in the darkness staring at each other, and then gradually the world reemerged. And you could completely understand the power and mystery and terror these events evoked 50,000 years ago. I mean, mm-hmm. I felt it. I mean, I just felt the elemental power of living on a planet, watching the moon go by, sailing by. Billy Collins emailed me and said it was the ultimate sunblock, which was pretty good. But no, truly, it was absolutely stunning. Mm-hmm. My kids could not get over it, and everyone felt somehow, I don't know, transformed, as if we'd witnessed some sort of miracle. And then it started getting a little bit light, as if on cue. All the birds started singing again, and the light arose, except here's what was strange about it for your viewers. If you looked off to the west, it looked like a sunrise happening, but it was 360 degrees. It looked like the sun was rising all around you, starting at the horizon.
Oh, wow.
This faint light. It was just fantastic. So I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but you really missed a good one.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, there's always 2045, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, hearing people talk about it reminds me of, the pale blue dot photo, or the way that astronauts recount seeing the full Earth, as a globe, which is something that is profoundly moving to think that all of life and everything that you sort of care about and worry about, every anxiety you've ever had, is like on the scum of that little ball, and that's all right in your view. It's kind of
all
the same
there.
thing as that this moon is blocking the whole thing, and there's nothing anybody could do about it if they ever wanted to stop it. I mean, it's just the power of our smallness, I guess, being sublime, and that's why I wanted to go. That's why I postponed the Rattlecast, and it just didn't.
That's and it makes perfect sense, Tim. And the other thing about it was, nobody was talking about politics. Nobody was talking about the right, the left. People were thinking, we are just small creatures inhabiting this tiny, not terribly significant planet, which is at the mercy of immense forces far beyond our comprehension. Mm-hmm. And if only for a few minutes, we put all that partisan divide behind us and thought about the miracle of being here, spinning through space as we are.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, a similar thing like with psychedelics too, and if only we could keep that sense of, our own place and everything in perspective more than the 2 minutes that the totality lasts.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. I know.
Well, if anybody has any questions for George, please do leave them in the chat windows on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll pass any along. And also if you're enjoying this conversation and the poetry, please do click the like button. No matter where you are, that really helps. A lot more people watching than have clicked like yet. And if I say that makes more people click like, which makes the show spread to more people. So let's up that. We only have 26. We've got like 100 people watching. So click the like button. That really helps. But in the meantime, George, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
All right. Here's a poem. This is a poem also from Central Air, and I wanted to read this for my son Michael, who just turned 11 a few days ago. And the poem is called "The Scar." And I want to tell you one thing before I read it. I mentioned the word Phidian, Phidian. It comes from an ancient Greek sculptor named Phidias, who was noted for the exquisite beauty of his busts, the delicacy with which he portrayed the human skull. It's called The Scar. And all parents probably rate their child-rearing experiences by number of visits to the ER. With Michael, it's only been 2, and this is one of them. My son slipped on the ladder to the pool and smacked his head, blood pooling on his small shoulders, the doctor stitching him whole. 3 years on, after a haircut, the scar still rises. A quarter moon, a woman will ask about as they lie there one night, her fingers in his hair, her voice in his ear, the secret delight of him, a bit like burnt toast, in her nostrils as she takes his strangeness into her. What she won't know is how that frail Phidian skull I held that day in my hands resounded on the hot concrete. It echoed all summer, less like an egg cracking in a bowl or a world breaking than the wild beating of love against my heart. Dear girl who will one day win him, that part of the boy is mine.
Another great poem that was from Central Air, and that is "The
Yeah,
Scar" by George
I,
Bilgere.
I feel very possessive of that scar.
Yeah, well, definitely, I can relate to that with the ER visits. We had two. We had a concussion, and a some kind of like little minor surgery too for my son, and my daughter nothing. So
Yeah.
it's 2-0 in
Well,
the
we have
scoring count.
we have a funny irony with our younger son, Alex. He's done only one ER visit, and that was because of a bad bump to the head he sustained in the ER when Michael was there. So he got injured. He got injured in the perfect place. He fell off a chair in the ER and had to go to the ER. So
Oh,
it was a
wow.
very short trip.
Well, that poem has a great ending, and some of your poems do. One of the things I wanted to ask about, you can see clearly in a few of the poems you read, what do we have in avocados. If we look back at avocados, one thing I noticed that you do kind of frequently is you push past a possible ending into something else. So as Michael comes in again, it's been 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and asks, "Are they ripe yet?" That could have ended the poem, and yet
Could have been.
you keep going for 3 more lines. Not quite yet. Want some cornflakes in the meantime? That's okay, he says. I'll wait. And so you have that kind of ending, and then the same thing happens in which poem was it? It was "Call the Fox." Or if we look at that
Yeah.
one, we have and then we thought. Let's see. So Mary, yeah. So it was So about getting it just right, had for once screwed up and created something even Mary Oliver couldn't get behind. And you can imagine the poem ending there.
That
And
would
then
be
it go-
right. Yeah.
Yep, and then it goes farther, and then we thought, well, since we're up anyway, and you know where it goes after that. So how do you know when to end a poem at that spot? Because I always think of it as like you're driving down a freeway, and you see like this off ramp, and a lot of times I'm writing the poem right before the Rattlecast, and so I'll just take that off ramp. But what if you keep going? And you could keep going. How do you know whether to
Yeah.
keep going or not?
That's a good question, because really my feeling is with poetry, less is more. I write very few poems that are more than 2 pages. I mean, more than 1 page, really. So I'm all for economy. But I like playing around with that. You read a lot of poems and you realize that there's a certain formula that a lot of poets use. And in some ways, this has been talked about a lot, but the structure of a poem is similar. The structure of certain poems is similar to the structure of a joke. There's a big setup. It's very precise. It's very economical. No words are wasted. And you tell this story. You provide the reader the joke here with this information, and then you surprise them with the startling punchline. But I like the idea of setting the reader up for the expectation of, that neat little insight at the end that so many poems have. But then I want to undermine them. I want to undermine that neat little insight with another possibility. Maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's an annoying habit I have, but I like pushing it one step farther in a lot of poems. Maybe sometimes it doesn't work. I don't know, but you're right. When I avocados certainly could end. Michael comes in. It's been 5 minutes and says, "Are they ripe yet?" Could have ended it there. I wanted that little extra thing, but I do not write long poems. I feel you've just got a little bit of energy to expend on this thing, and let's get through it.
How do you know? Like, where do you know when a poem is going to end? As you're sitting down writing, do you know at some point where the destination will be? Or do you get
No.
to it and you say, that's it? Or is it in the revision process where after you've written a lot of stuff, you say, oh, I got to carve it down and, oh, there's the way it can end?
No, I do this. And I tell my students too, also, I overwrite my poems. I write longhand in a notebook, and I write everything I can think of about what the poem will be. And then I go through the draft, and the most fun I ever have in writing. I don't like writing. Writing is work. I don't really like that process most of the time. It's something you have to do. But the pleasure is revising, especially when, and this happens to me with my successful poems, this happens all the time. You've written a poem that's 50 lines long. You've written it out in your notebook, you type it up, and you think, it's just not working. It's just lying there dead on the page. You make this change, that change. You keep looking at it, and then you realize, you know what? This is a 50-line poem. If I dropped the first 15 lines and started here, and then dropped the last 10 lines and ended right there, that's where the poem is. It was hiding in there. You kind of needed those booster rockets to get you into the poem, but now you can get rid of them. And then you had to write your way out of the poem. I mean, every writer does this. Every poet does this, I know, but at the end of the poem, you kind of explain what the poem's about, like the reader's too dumb to figure it out. You go to that part and just get rid of it. And suddenly the poem, it's untethered, it's set free, it floats up like a helium balloon, and you think, wow, I just got rid of all that baggage around it. And snip, snip, snip. I never add to a draft. I always cut, chop, chop, chop. And you get it right to that point where chopping one more line, the poem would fall apart. But that's my real pleasure as a writer. Revising is fun. The hard work has been done. How about you? Do you do that?
I don't really revise much. I think I revise in the sitting. Like I try to get into some space where I'm totally absorbed in a poem, and either it works or it doesn't, and then the space closes, and then I'm gone. And either the poem stays or doesn't, and whatever. It was sort of like about this like meditation. I'm in that sort of camp.
Yeah.
So I don't even look back. I mean, maybe I'll look back and change a comma, or like there's a word that that annoyed me at the time, and I go back and like change it, and then I'll change it back. And that's about all I do. But yeah.
You spend an hour thinking about the word, you change it, and then you change it back. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. And I still, and to this day, there's like poems in my book that there's a word that I didn't like then. I changed it. I still don't like it, and I just the one word.
And it haunts you.
It does. It haunts my sleep every night.
Well, I mean, I know this is true of every poet I've talked to. You write your books, you publish them, and then you're reading from them at a reading somewhere a few years later, and you think, I'm going to change that line. You change it as you're reading because you realize you got it wrong and it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because the poems come from someplace else. I feel like you're sort of channeling them in and trying to find it at the time. And you preemptively answered Monica Dobos' question. She wanted to know about revision, whether or not you revise. So there's a great answer to that. Gwendolyn Soper, though, has a great addition to those endings. It's more of a comment than a question. I heard George read live in 2013. He said you can end any poem with, and then I ate a ham sandwich. Do you still hold this, George?
I have said that several times, and I'm not proud of it, but it's true. Yeah. Sometimes if you can't think of a way of ending the poem, just do something utterly ridiculous and you're out of there. Right?
Well, that's not bad.
I went for that one.
I think let's do one poem and then one more question and then a last poem to make sure we get some. We're running out of time.
You want me to do one last one?
2 poems. Let's do one poem and then a little bit more and then a last.
All right. I'll do a poem called this wasn't even on. No, I'll do this poem called Misting from Cheap Motels of My Youth. Misting. Misting is the one thing involving flowers I'm reasonably good at. Daybreak finds me in the yard with my hose, attentive as a bee. What a pleasure to choose mist on my watering gun and drift like a cloud above the roses. Last month, my sister died, a storm of lightning in her brain, And now this news that someone who once was the object of all my bouquets is spending her final summer. Each day brings more bad weather, which is another way of saying I'm in my 60s. But here, in the frail September morning, my hand tipped in fog, the flowers lift their faces to me with bright, mystifying questions. And for once, I have an answer.
Yeah, it's a great poem. That's the one I chose to be the back segment of the chapbook.
Yeah.
Misting. Another one of those poems with a great sort of transformation of how you think of the word misting by the time you get to the end of that poem. So mystifying is hidden in there as well. There's a question here. Who was it? It was from, to scroll up a long way. Sorry for that. Okay. No, it's not here. There it is. So Mary Keating wanted to know, George, how do you get inspired to write a poem? And that's one thing I wonder about too. Do you find yourself sitting down to write a poem and then the memory comes? Or are you triggered by something? Like, will you write an eclipse poem and do you know that? How are you inspired in that way? Or is it like the writing process that inspires the memory that is pulled out in the poem?
I do something, that's a good question. And I do something that I've recommended to a million writers. I carry a tiny little spiral notebook in my pocket with a pencil. And as I go through the day, if I see something that seems like I might want to write about it, I will open the page and write a tiny little note to myself about what it was. Like an example I give is a couple of years ago, I was feeling like I was coming down with the flu. So I walked from my house over to the local drugstore, the CVS. And as I was walking into the door, the automatic sliding door, right there on the sidewalk in front of me was a dead sparrow. I think probably it had flown into the glass. And I thought, I'm walking into the store to get some medicine. And most people go into the CVS are getting drugs, stuff like that. But you are greeted by this dead bird. And it happened that I had just read an article about the depletion of forests and natural habitats in Ohio. And so first I picked up the bird by his tail, carried him over to the trash can, and dropped him in rather ceremoniously. And then second, I jotted down in my notebook, CVS dead bird. Okay, that's enough, because if I didn't do that, when I sat down to write, I would have forgotten about it. You know, there's all this stuff going on. So I will sit down to write and I take out that notebook and there might be 5 or 6 things like this. So I never sit down, with like a blank slate and just say, gosh, what am I going to write about? I open this thing up and say, okay, let's see where that dead bird poem might lead. So it's a simple but really practical tip. And I know nowadays you can have your notes app in your phone and do that. So that works just as well. But for some reason, I'm sticking with my little spiral notebook thing. Mm-hmm. So that's how, I don't know, inspiration seems like a kind of my idea. Here's my idea of inspiration. And I think a lot of people would share this. I don't think I've ever been inspired to write a poem. But inspiration is something that happens while I'm writing the poem. I'm working on this poem and I'm thinking, this isn't very good and it's not going anywhere. And why are you so boring? And suddenly, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. Suddenly the poem, its eyes open. It's alive. And that's inspiration. I think inspiration is what happens in the process of writing, not before writing, at least for me. So I sit down very mechanically, I look in my notebook, I start writing. Usually the poem doesn't succeed, right? It usually ends up in the trash bin. But now and then in the course of writing it, bingo, something unexpected happens, something from a part of yourself you perhaps didn't even know existed. that surprises you.
Yeah, that's really interesting because at first, as you were talking, I was thinking like, well, it's the opposite of like how I approach a poem. Because I would have, earlier on, I would read a lot, and then I would start to, as I'm reading something else, start daydreaming about something that's like related but not. And then that would be like, get me into a poem, and I'd like put that book down and write. And now it's like prompts for the prompt lines that we do coming up really soon, where there's a prompt setting up. And basically what you're doing, though, is you're having your own little book of prompts that you make as you go through life. And when you sit down to your desk, you're saying, okay, I'm going to work on this one. And that's like a self-prompt that you'd recorded throughout the day. So it's sort of the same kind of thing. Yeah, and then the inspiration is there in the process. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you come to obvious things, like, of course, you have to write a poem about the eclipse. I have to write a poem about the eclipse. Every poet in America right now is writing their eclipse poem. I want to get mine in first. It's I thought yesterday during this eclipse, everyone was with their fancy cameras and filters. They were taking pictures of the totality, right? But of course, they all knew that in the morning on all media, there would be billions of pictures of this. And I was thinking, yeah, but there'll probably be even more poems. But I look forward to seeing them. And some editor is saying, we're going to put together a book of, Eclipse, the Eclipse anthology.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen.
It'll happen.
So one more question for you before we do the last poem, George.
Yeah.
I've just been wondering about this because your book, the Cheap Motels of My Youth, there are 25 poems in the book, and only 5 have been published in literary magazines, and 3 in a New Ohio Review and 2 in Quill and Parchment.
Yeah.
And and a poet like you, everybody loves your poems. People know who you are. It seems like you just be throwing poems out all over the place and publishing. Is there a reason that you're not doing a lot of literary magazine publishing?
I am. The issue is timing. Mm-hmm. I decided I wanted to enter the Rattle Chapbook competition right after Central Air came out, and I didn't have any poems. Mm-hmm. The poems, the poems that I submitted for this chapbook contest represented what I'd written in the last 6-8 months or something like that. So whenever you have a book taken and published, at least for me, there's a period where it's kind of back to square one, where you're starting to build up a body of stuff. So don't be alarmed. I'm sending poems out. They're coming out in the journals. But yeah, I realize that looks strange. But when I that was the summer before last, right?
It was just last year. Yeah.
Last year. Mm-hmm. I just didn't have anything. The things I had were the things I'd written. And so I was delighted. I can't tell you how pleased I was that all of them suddenly got published in this wonderful looking book.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I have been noticing a trend. Like we talked to Bob Hickok a couple months ago, and he doesn't even think about publishing anymore. He just has a grad student, and he'll be like, he writes a poem, sends it to them, and then they throw it out in the world maybe, and he doesn't care at all. And I hear a lot more of that there's a little less enthusiasm about literary magazines. So I was wondering if that had something to do with it.
Yeah, and, well, can I say something about that? I think the process of sending your poems out to journals has become, it's so, submitting on Submittable is kind of clinical, inhuman. And I was talking to, former U.S. Poet Laureate Ted Kuzer the other day about this. Ted loves to publish his poems on Facebook. And if you publish a poem on Facebook, and plenty of you out here watching tonight know this, you get 10, 15, 20, 30, 100 people say, hey, I like this poem, I like this, I like this. Whereas if you send to the prestigious literary journal, you'll hear nothing for 8 months, and then you might get an AI-generated rejection. And it's not real satisfying. And even when you get an acceptance, it's, we have accepted your poem. So I feel like I haven't really thought this out, and I don't want to be misinterpreted here. I've worked for literary journals, many of them I love and really admire. Um, but there seems like at the moment it seems like they exist at kind of a professional distance from the intimacy of the writer.
Mm-hmm.
I look in my file cabinets from the 1990s, and I've got all these hand typed letters from editors and who read the work and talked about it. I have 2 or 3 paragraph rejection letters, if you can imagine that. Dear George, we're not taking this. Here's why. That world is long gone. It's all computerized, digitized.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that has something to do with like somebody, a wonderful poet like Bob Hickok getting a little bit
Mm-hmm.
turned off by all this.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because it's a perfect segue into next week's guest, who's Kim Stafford, who is started just posting his poems online, and his whole book that just came out with Red Hen Press is nothing but poems that he just published online and put up into Red Hen Press's book, and that's the thing. It's so much more satisfying. You're the chance of reaching just as many people. And it's almost like, why bother sending to literary magazines? That's what I do too. I mean, I just write a poem every week or some extra stuff and throw it up on social media, and I get a little enjoyment out of that. And then
True.
I can, put the book out if I want. And I don't know. I mean, it's a weird thing for me as a literary magazine editor, but it feels like literary magazines are less and less relevant every year, and I'm trying to resist that. Various
I
means.
agree with that, and it's funny that you would say that. as an editor of a really well-known and very powerful and influential journal, you're feeling that too. So I worry about the future of these magazines. And of course, like all old guys, I love print. I love books. I love solid things that exist in the world. And I don't want these journals to go away. So maybe they need to find a way to seem more relevant. But can I just say one other thing here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For all your listeners, Tim Green is amazing, and he's wonderful, and he's one of the kindest and most generous and hardest working editors out there. And anyone who's had the pleasure of working with him understands this. And I hope you realize how grateful people are to you, Tim, for all you do. I mean, do you ever sleep?
Well, sometimes, 6 hours a night maybe. But yeah, thanks so much, George. It's really sweet of you to say. And, especially, from a poet whose work I love, it was so fun working with you. I mean, it was fun putting this chapbook together, and over the years doing the Rattlecasts. And it's just been great. Well, let's run it. We're sort of past time. Let's do one last poem to close it out.
All right. We'll do a last poem. It's the last poem in the book. And it's a poem about my parents, and it's another poem that reflects my endless fascination with the mystery of time and memory and reflection. And it's the last poem in Cheap Motels, and it's called Salad. It is a summer evening in 1948. My mother and father are in the backyard of the little duplex they rented. Summer evening in St. Louis. I have yet to exist, but nonetheless, I know that 2 hamburgers are on the grill, and the beer is cold in the humid dusk. A dog barks next door. My father turns the burgers. My mother goes in to set the table for 2 and make a salad. There's more beer in the fridge. They don't even have a TV. Nobody does. In the kitchen that does not include me, the burgers are great, and my father says something that makes my mother laugh so hard that I can hear her in my backyard tonight in Cleveland, where, thanks to them, I exist. At the grill, a beer in my hand, a dog barking. My wife in the kitchen making salad.
Yeah, another great poem. That was Salad by George Bilgere from the new chapbook, which all subscribers have, Cheap Motels of My Youth, another best-selling poetry book. I mean, you get 10,000 copies out. It's not that bad.
Amazing.
But if you don't have a copy of Cheap Motels of My Youth, all you have to do is subscribe to Rattle to pick up a copy. Because if you get it, you get the spring issue and the chapbook, which is right here in the mail for $30 for a year. You get 4 issues and 4 chapbooks. That's a pretty great deal, especially when you get a book as wonderful as George Bilgere's. Thanks, George, for being here, for being such an entertaining and positive light within the poetry world.
Thank you, Tim. Good night.
Yep, take care. Have a good night. And that was George Bilgere. Again, he's the author of Cheap Motels of My Youth, a whole bunch of other books, 8 of them, I believe. Yeah, 8 collections of poetry, plus this chapbook. You can find all of his work at George Bilgere, that's BILGERE.com, georgebilgere.com. And that is going to wrap up the main section of the show, or the first half. We're going to go to the open lines. Next are the prompt lines. I never stop doing that. And so how it works is this. Here's the prompt for this week. The prompt was to write a poem that has an internal rhyme in every line. Does the prompt write a poem that has internal rhyme in every line? To share a poem, all you have to do is email it first to prompt lines. That's prompt lines, all one word, at rattle.com. Email it there so we can show it on the screen as you read it, and then find the Zoom link in the chat windows on YouTube or Facebook, which I'm about to deploy. So I'll pin them to the top of the chat windows and share the poem. It's a 2-page max this week. Next week, though, we're switching it up and making it a 1-page max. We got to make sure we get to everybody as quickly as we can to get as many poets in. And most of the poems are 1 page, so we thought we would make it just a 1-page, 1-poem max. If you have a longer poem, you can always, of course, submit that still to the prompt poem of the month. But for the prompt lines themselves live, it's going to be a 1-page max starting next week. Just a heads up on that. We'll remind you again at the end of the show. But the Zoom links are deployed. Join us over on Zoom only if you'd like to share a poem. If you would like to just sit back and watch and enjoy all the great poetry, sit right where you are, and I'll be right back with all of that and Katie Dozier. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. We are here with our Prompt Poems editor, Katie Dozier. A little bit of better microphone positioning we have, so hopefully the sound is a little better. It's great to hear you, Katie.
It looks kind of like a little moon.
It does. It's going to eclipse the...
Yeah, I was like trying to lay one up for you to do the eclipse joke.
Exactly.
I love the interview so much.
Yeah, it's so fun to talk to George Bilgere. I mean, he's just one of my favorite poets and just a fun guest. We're at that point where... everybody who's been on like 3 years ago or so is like asking to come back on, and we can't have everybody back on because then we wouldn't have new guests.
Right.
You know, it's like once you get to that point. But George Bilgere, we would never turn him down because he is so fun and really fun talking to him.
Yeah, I loved the idea of actually writing down your ideas. As a poet, you can do that. Apparently, you can't just be like, oh, I should write about that later and then hopefully have it. You can write it down.
I rely on my subconscious as a stenographer.
Yeah.
And hopefully hope that works.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to get a small moleskin as a result of that interview, I think.
Let's see. So, let's see. I just want to make sure because somebody chatted that they can't hear, but I'm not sure. To make sure. Yeah, Dick could hear us. We're good. Okay. So anyway, so we have the prompt poet of the month, but I totally forgot to preview. I should have been like teasing that the whole show. But the prompt poet of the month was Nancy Beagle. And so tell us about the poem you picked and why you picked it. And then Nancy couldn't be here because she's traveling, but a wonderful poem. Take it away.
Why don't I go ahead and read it first? Because I don't like spoiling it before.
All
That's
right.
all right. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. We'll read it and then talk about it.
So this will be on Rattle's site tomorrow, right? It's going to be published tomorrow?
No, Thursday.
Thursday, sorry. So it's a preview of that.
Yep.
Okay. The wedding doll. She boxed me, saving me, she said, for the wedding. She shall be my centerpiece, stand next to the cake. That was when she was 12. I was a birthday gift to a girl who loved dolls, a girl who had dreams, pictured herself apron-clad in a sunny kitchen fixing pot roast for a husband, 4 children. It is now 65 years later, and I'm stuck up in the attic like a child's cradle outgrown or a rocking horse no longer needed, and I am still in the turquoise box with magenta lettering proclaiming Madame Alexander, we, the most cherished dolls of the era. This was before Barbie, Cabbage Patch Kids, and American Girl. My box has begun to collapse, its corners broken, its top dented from move after move. The wedding dress I wear now is tainted, tea-brown with age. The lace delicate, ready to dissolve at the touch. My face, too, is cracked, but my blue eyes are still open. She takes me out now and then and witnesses time, acknowledges that I never got that center spotlight, nor did she. How do I feel having been boxed for decades? How does she feel, never having had a man to hold at night, children to embrace? She, too, has been in a box, hers constructed of societal expectations, no less imprisoned than I. Do I pity her? Not really. She had choices, whereas I had none. She could have, at any time, lifted her lid, flown over the edge.
Yeah, really great ending on that poem. And The Wedding Doll by Nancy Beagle, really touching. So why did you pick that one, Katie?
So this was the prompt where we took a childhood toy and wrote from the perspective of the toy. And one thing I really loved about this poem is I did not expect the leap it made at the very end. And I think that tied in so well with the entire theme of the poem, the idea of not taking that leap. And then it feels like the poem's not going to take that leap. So it became very interesting to me in that way. And I also loved that I couldn't tell at points almost if she was talking about the doll or talking, the speaker talking about themselves too. So I really loved that. And then how visceral the doll itself was.
Yeah, really powerful. I mean, that's my first time reading it, actually.
Yeah.
I pasted it into the website. I'm proofreading as we go to make sure. And it is so moving given that slow transition where you sort of realize the doll is a metaphor for the self. And I'm really talking about myself in the poem as you're reading it. Really powerful. What was your experience like reading the submissions this week? Because this is one of the ones you read sort of early on, and you were a little teary-eyed about it.
Yeah, I was.
And George Bilgere said, no tears for the reader, no tears for the writer, that kind of thing. And if a poem moves us that much, it's definitely the poem that we go to. They don't come up often, that much. Where get misty-eyed reading a poem.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was the risk taken in writing this. I mean, it's really hard to write about regret and of that magnitude. It's maybe the hardest thing, I think, to write about regret honestly and to be authentic and be able to let go enough to write something that rings so honestly as this poem does to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, great poem. That is Nancy Beagle with The Wedding Doll, which will be the poem of the day on Thursday. So looking forward to sharing that, but a little preview for all those who watch the Rattlecast.
Yeah, and congratulations to Nancy. So we had a lot of submissions, of course, too, and there were a lot of really excellent poems, as there always tend to be for some reason here.
There always do. It's tough.
Yeah.
Right now we're reading the chapbooks, too.
Yeah.
And gosh, it is so hard. We are down to like 20 chapbooks for the Chapbook Prize. And wow, it is hard to figure out which one we should pick.
It is.
But we have a week, so we'll see. How that goes.
Yeah.
Well, less than a week, actually, because it's Tuesday, not Monday.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, anyway, let's go to... Oh, wait, we have our own.
We have our own poems.
We have our own poems. I forgot about that. So, what did you do? The prompt for this week, as we saw, was to... I'll put it right here. It was write a poem with internal rhyme in every line.
Yeah.
That was the prompt for this week. So, what did you do, Katie?
Well, I guess it won't surprise George Bilgere that I went ahead and wrote about the eclipse. I'm sorry. I know everybody's going to. But I wanted to explore that, and sort of what was... So, as you talked about, of course, we were set up to be able to see the eclipse well, and then it just totally petered out completely, like to a magnitude. I couldn't have even imagined how not an event it was, considering how close we were to the path of totality. But anyway, I was... then watching on the news about how everyone was reacting, so much. And I loved how emotional an experience this was for everyone. And just that's how I feel when I'm either, enjoying really amazing poetry or writing what I think is pretty good poetry. And so I wanted to explore that through this. And I did it in our Hyben crown, which is fun and was your idea. So I think you should say it. And I think I need a sip of water. So you should.
Well, for National Poetry Month, we decided to do, me and Katie, a crown of Hyben, which is something that maybe other people have done, but maybe I made up.
I
don't
thought you
know.
Invented it.
Well, I did, but there's convergent evolution. Other
That's
people
true.
might have thought of that too.
Maybe.
Somebody else called a daisy chain of Hyben, so maybe that's what someone else has done and called it. I don't know.
That's nice.
But anyway, the idea was that we would take, Hyben, which is the prose or some kind of, longer form, ending with a haiku, that combination, and then take every word from the haiku, kind of like a crown of sonnets, and every word becomes something in the prose of the next Hyben. And so we sort of go back and forth like that. I have to use your words, you have to use my words, and we go back and forth like that. So my haiku, leading into this one, I guess I could say, so it's not your fault writing about the solar eclipse.
That's true. I had to. I had no choice.
I saw you with it, because my haiku was solar eclipse over the clouds for a spell. And then you came up with this using the prompt, doing double duty, both the prompt and the Hyben thing that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to do both at once. So, all right. In the round. Somehow we live our lives between eclipses, which is to say we've learned to play within ellipses. How the real story unfurls backstage, the ingenue so in love with the usher, to continue another popcorn of a tale. Outside, a classic car horn blares us back to where, in pairs, lovers used to hold hands along the track, how grapes grab a vine. And there it is again, that curve before it all began. Just as a carousel turns, the world yearns to see the moon top hat the sun. How black and white is best broken up with red lips, and this in the space before a spell's kiss, which, solar-powered, travels above the clouds, but it too must topple down, a raindrop for your mouth. Shattering, the fourth wall, a show of stars.
Yeah, so that is a Hyben in the round.
I will say, too, I just kind of threw up a lot of rhyme. Hoped I was fulfilling the prompt. So I think it counts. I can't exactly submit to myself, so I'm going to give myself a pass.
You can't disqualify yourself.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, although they're not in every line.
They're not. The problem was, too, that I wrote it, and then I edited it forgetting that was the prompt, and I was like, I cut out some of the rhyme. But
yeah, well, that's a great poem. I love that, though, we've learned to play within the ellipses. Of course, coming off the rhyme, too. How, it is in the ellipsis that most of life happens, and making something out of that is something that we should all be working to do. So I love that aspect of it.
Thank you. It was very fun to write. You guys know I'm obsessed with writing Hyben.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a fun exercise that we're doing. And we're going to put like a chapbook or something together at the end of this month. Yeah. So should I read one of mine or should I can't decide. I did write another one.
Oh, you did? Good job. You pulled it off.
I don't know. Which one should I go with?
You should go with whatever sounds more exciting to you in this moment.
I don't know. Maybe I'll do one of mine too, because the thing about like using internal rhyme is I'm kind of propelled by internal rhyme with every poem. That's kind of what like makes me think of like other things to say.
Right.
So it's sort of all over, everything I write. And so maybe
you had multiple, whereas I'm propelled by weird turns of thought, unfortunately for me and everybody else in the universe.
So maybe I'll read this one. I like the haiku best on this one.
Okay.
Which is this one. Yeah. I'll do Sanctuary. And so there's a lot of internal rhyme here. And since it's a Hyben, there's really just one line. Through the whole, it's prose.
Oh, so okay. One line. So how convenient! You only have to have one rhyme.
But there is internal rhyme in every line. So here's Sanctuary, and this is my April 4th one. It was based on this haiku by Katie.
Oh, yeah.
A grasshopper leaps to the next blade at turn of the century.
That one was fun.
That was a fun one. Yeah, wait, set me up there like a volleyball set. And then here's the poem, Sanctuary. Every autumn, the grasshoppers would move into the garage. They'd gather near the water heater, and at the turn of a light leap to the boxes of books I'd stack next to it. But what they loved most was the lawnmower, the ghost of the grass still haunting the gap between its deck and the cutting blade. By winter, they'd move through the cracks in the century-old foundation and climb into the walls for warmth. Their legs were a chorus of clicks in the sheetrock until that space, too, was taken by the cold. The mounds of their ancestors must have added to the insulation. Shedding with age, the exoskeleton dance party. So that is my Hyben for April 4th, and I got to write one tomorrow while we're, I guess, on a plane, so that's going to be fun.
That'll be fun. Always fun when a poem ends with a dance party, right?
That
you can't get that every day.
Well, I knew you would like a dance party.
That's kind of like the ham sandwich from the show with George. I do want to write that poem.
And then I had a dance party.
I mean, that's how they do it in the movies, right? They just don't know what to do. They do it in a dance party.
Do. Or the montage.
The montage, yeah. Not the ham sandwich so much.
Well, let's go to our prop lines finally. And the first poet up is none other than Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I did write in the chat, pick someone else first.
Well, it's just if I start to go out of order, that makes it really hard to keep up. You know what I mean? It's like I go down the line, and so your internet connection is too. We talked about this before. You gotta get a dial-up interconnection or something. Anyway, but we love to have you first, and it's nice having your reactions in the corner of my view as we're talking too.
Well, I enjoyed it. I'm sorry that you all had the cloud cover. 1970, I traveled to North Florida with with 9 high school friends and a high school physics teacher to see an eclipse on a Greyhound bus, and we were clouded in.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So we did get more of the shadow screaming across the sky than you did.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a profound event. It just was not as profound as yesterday, where I wound up in the middle of Indiana at a stranger's farm right at 4 minutes of totality.
Oh, wow. And is this your own photograph that you sent, Dick?
Yeah, I thought
That's
I'd
amazing.
send
that is, yeah. So I'll put this on screen for those watching at home.
I love the hot pink. It's so cool. It makes me like pink even more than I already do.
Yeah, and you can even, that is the thing. I was watching a little bit of, and the weathermen were talking about, how Cleveland and Ohio had the best view because there was an active solar arc. What do you call those?
Prominence. They're called prominence.
Prominence. That's the word. Yeah. So there's a prominence you can see on the northern limb there.
Wow.
And that's the kind of thing that rips off in a coronal mass ejection and toasts all the woolly mammoths. So
Whoa.
there you go.
Right. Yeah. It was. Obviously, it is what people said it was, and I had taken my telescope up there, which was a distraction. there were some things I didn't get to experience because I was managing traffic at my telescope as people were
Uh,
taking
Hmm.
image. But I was glad I finally got one. You know how much I'm obsessed with uh, cosmological things, and this one so close to home was
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. So what is your setup like for the camera and all that?
I used my iPhone. I just held it up to the eyepiece.
Oh
Uh,
wow,
wow, that's
that's
with
a
your iPhone?
that's like an
Wow.
advertisement for
Yeah,
it's
that's
iPhones
what
held
right
up
it
to
is.
the
there.
eyepiece of my telescope of my.
Yeah, but still, that's wow.
Wow.
Um, yeah, that made me sort of think my next expenditure should be a real setup, but nah, that's too much trouble. And like I said, you kind of lose, the telescope is a wonderful tool to look at these things, and you do feel the optical connection that you do looking directly, different than a photograph, but you miss some of the other things. And I don't regret doing the telescope, but I also regret not looking at the people around me. That's the thing that's sort of
Hmm.
there were 20 people there who were like, experiencing a peak event, and I was sort of managing traffic at the telescope and making sure nobody was there when the sun came back and blinded them. So,
Well, that's
um,
important.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
well, yeah, well, I mean, you got me this photo, Dick. So
Yeah, you
that's
got the
worth.
photo I dreamed of getting myself.
So
But yeah,
you can experience it. What's the word? Oh gosh,
secondhand.
Vicariously.
vicariously.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Um, uh, through me, and you'll get some more chances. I won't. So, so take your next chance. Uh, so
So,
actually, the very interestingly, the sky was a little, and you'll see the picture in my poem.
mhm.
The sky, which would have been crystal clear, except that they're on a flight pattern, and because of the particular upper level atmosphere or mid-level atmosphere conditions, the contrails from the jets were persistent.
Mhm.
And there's a photograph on the poem that I sent in that shows what the sky looked like before
Yeah,
the
yeah, we
like,
have it here, which is unfortunate that that all that clouds are generated by the water vapor, not the chemicals, but the water
that's sort of
vapor in the
the
air.
conceit of my poem. Is like the conspiracy theorists about the chemtrails,
Hmm.
but they're not really seeing the real damage that actual condensation trails do.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. I was looking up actually, about what effect that has on warming. And because they're so high, apparently they let in long wave but not short wave, and so they actually contribute to warming, even though you'd think clouds would have the opposite effect if they're lower. So interesting too.
and they're doing it whether we can see them or not.
Hmm.
The condensation is happening.
Yeah.
So anyway, and like you, when I write, I'm always driven by sound and internal rhyme. And although they're not dead rhymes or exact rhymes, it's just like it's hearing that sound and dragging the poem forward to it, and then hearing the next sound and the poem going to it. So this was not the only trick here was making sure I had one on each line as opposed
Hmm.
to drag connecting across lines like often happens.
Well, let's
So
hear it, Dick. Yeah, conspiracy
okay,
theory.
conspiracy theory. At the tip of the copper beach, a single cardinal perches red against the slate sky. Clouds are draped so low I can touch the rain before it touches me. Above the gray, clueless to spring's confusion, a flock of passenger jets sketch the air with messages none can see. Beneath it all, the beach is still stubborn about its leaves, holds them snug until no doubt remains new ones will survive a late freeze. I've heard hypotheses, conspiracies, they say, that the plains spread mystery, chemicals which will do terrible things to me. But what could be worse than not seeing what's already there? On moonless nights, passengers in their window seats peer up at endless stars and are glad they cannot sleep. Here on the home planet, our theories drowse and dream, and for 8 quiet hours, no one asks what they mean.
Yeah, I love that final couplet, especially Dick. And yeah, I've grown tired of explaining why there's that checkerboard pattern of so many people, especially in my town. I don't know, maybe everywhere. I mean, there's like, it's just a topic of conversation and a
Well,
bunch of nonsense.
in Tennessee, they're passing a law against chemtrails.
Well, that's an easy law to follow.
It's an easy law to enforce, but it's sort of like, no
Yeah.
chemtrails in
Yeah,
Tennessee.
which does cloud the. I think geoengineering is really dangerous and not something that we should mess with at the same time. And so, the real idea of spraying things in the atmosphere as if you know what's the downstream consequences of that are going to be in order to mitigate climate change is something else worth talking about too. But that clouds it over, no pun intended.
Well,
And that whole thing was just to set up that dad
Oh,
joke.
good. Thank God.
that's what the line, what could be worse than not seeing what's already there, it's right there. We just have the made up things sort of obscure us paying attention to the things that are important.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Dick. Great poem. I definitely love the sounds in that. Thanks for sharing it.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was Dick Westheimer with Conspiracy Theory. And next in line, we have Mary Keating.
Oh wow! I almost beat Dick.
Yeah, it was close. You were second
Wow.
at the line. Yeah.
I loved your face when you called and you looked like you won a contest. That was awesome.
I know. It's like wow.
Yay.
I'm getting my computer. So I tried this poem like 3 times because I didn't read the prompt right, and so then I realized you wanted internal rhymes.
Mm-hmm.
So I came across this word, a word of the day, risible. I didn't know what it meant. So it means comic or something funny.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
So this poem came from that. A new corporate beatitude. It's advisable to sit next to somebody risible during corporate meetings, eating time up like a Labrador, which all adore. Which all adore anything edible. Many times, I admit, I've been caught snoozing when I ought to have been a legal beagle for management as a top VP, prone to drone on with the cadences of a dense stone wall. My boss would abruptly wake me by tossing paper clips at my head. Later, I dread him calling me into his office, appalled by my lapse into a coma. I'd get that phone message and cringe. I'm already a bit unhinged by my boyfriend mumbling about ending our 6-year relationship, unless I fix my tendencies to space out when he shouts for things he needs, minus pretty please. Usually, he yells when the New York Times spelling bee is driving me crazy, growls, I'm a lazy bee. I just can't remember when I trusted my power to all these glowering men. But lately, it seems I've been daydreaming about being an entrepreneur who won't endure anything or anyone without a sense of humor or fun. I think it's got something to do with you. I got a hunch you'd rather go out to lunch with me, see where this goes, than sit for hours at the next meeting about apex strategies. By the way, did you say you're a fan of poetry or prose? How you answer shows if this feeling between us, unless I misread that smirk. Oh, please, God, do not be another jerk.
Oh, that's great. And I really love the way that just listening to the poem, the rhythm of having those rhymes through, I think that's the exact perfect length for having an internal rhyme-based line. It's really nice.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mary.
Thank you very much. It was really fun prompt, Katie.
Oh, good. I'm glad, Mary.
Thank you.
That's great. I wonder if is there a word for that kind of form? I don't know. I rarely see. I mean, it's similar to that syllabic verse that we've
Maybe
had
you
sometime.
should name it right now. Put you on the spot, right?
Katie rhymes.
Yay!
Okay. Well, let's go next to Carla Schwartz. And we got to kind of pick up the pace because I just looked at the clock.
Yeah, it's a little frighteningly late.
It is, yeah. But it's been such a fun night already. So, hey, Carla, how you doing?
I'm doing well. This has been an amazing night, and I won't tell you about my total eclipse experience, but
no. Well, I'm glad for you. I'm past the envy and jealousy into just being happy for everybody. So I'm glad that you had the most spiritual, amazing experience of your life that I'll never have.
We just have to wait.
It was even more than that, but I won't tell you about that. But and I just want to say about this prompt is that I was driven by the rhymes, by the internal sounds. And so I think a narrative did come out of this, but I'm just amazed that other poems actually had, more narrative to them to begin with. So anyway, this is called Wincing Down Intolerance. Why drink the wine now, then wine, then drown? To toast your neighbor, sink lower than your vast emptiness. Instead, realize you can't fend in West Hempstead, where a putz serves the milk only in coconuts. Once you've had your thrill, what else will you? I worry I've failed miserably. I'm sorry, my worst self escapes in bursts, then burrows. I have 40 reasons for sinking beneath the understory. Ashamed, I lip sync or dwell in mutterland, disdained for all the despicable sentences evicted from my tongue, 32 to be exact, too few for the next war I never instigated. I wanted to be adorable, but the label said deplorable, stuck onto the bent envelope and sent to heaven. None of the hateful thoughts, none of the peaceful. Bear your wrath against the half-calf crying in the hay. Never was she as heavy-footed as when she lost her will to survive, as when her conscience took a dive. Time, all she needs, she thinks, as she tries to unbind her thoughts, the ones that squawk even as she walks.
Oh, that was great. Wincing Down Intolerance by Carla Schwartz. And I can't help but say again, I love how much fun it is to listen to these with the rhyme. It's just
Huts and coconuts is pretty amazing, Carla.
Thank you.
It's something, it holds the poem together, having the sounds that you can anticipate and wait for. And it's just so fun to hear. It's just another, I always say we need more formal poems, and I think I'm just winning that argument right now. Thanks for sharing that.
Because we made a prompt where people have to rhyme.
Where they had to, exactly. Well, thanks, Carla.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
It's Carla Schwartz once again. And Nancy Tennell is next.
All right. Well, I didn't write a poem about the eclipse, but last week, right after Katie gave this prompt, we had tornadoes.
Oh, wow.
That's scary. Yeah.
So it was a natural phenomenon occurring. But when I wrote this, I didn't want the rhymes to be totally obvious. I wanted the flow to feel natural and not metric, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But my poem is called The Sorrow You Were Saving.
Okay.
The sorrow you were saving for tomorrow has come, since today refused to delay its arrival. Trouble chased you, blew through your dreams and plans, like the wind when it descends and funnels downward, a storm fierce enough to pierce metal and wood, wielding fury that crushes, brings injury. It leaves in its wake only heartbreak and destruction, the desperation that comes from isolation and fear. If you want joy to find you, to remind you of hope, stand firm. Grieve the loss, leave the darkness, lift your face to the sun.
Oh, that's beautiful. That ain't great sounds.
I guess that could be an Eclipse reference there at the end.
Uh-oh.
It really could. It snuck in through the collective
Yeah.
unconscious. Yeah, well, wonderful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy.
Thank you.
It is Nancy Tanel with The Sorrow You Were Saving. Bishwajit Mishra is next.
Hey, Tim.
Hey,
Katie,
Biz,
good
how you
evening.
doing?
Hi.
Sorry about your experience about missing it, but yeah, you'll get another chance.
We will someday.
Yeah, I know.
Hopefully, we're lucky.
No, we didn't get it because in our part it wasn't there.
Right.
It was on the eastern side, so we didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was great interview, but we are running later, so I'll go to the point. But I'll tell you one thing: it's like a deja vu. George talked about. He read the book, a poem about books, and I was telling you last time I have got back into writing every day. I sit in the bed or sometimes someplace around that time, and whatever catches my attention, I write it. So I wrote a book just exactly 1 week back, a poem on books, because those are library books. They were sitting there. And there are odd combinations, like there's a Mary Oliver, there is a haiku, and there is a mystery.
Oh, wow.
So all this. So I wrote how many people would have read these books in library, and how many stories are not in the books, but those are the stories. So that's what I was telling. It was just like a deja vu. I sent it to you, but there's no time, so I'm going to go back to the prompt one then.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to read it. But I thought if there are fewer people, then I might read it. Okay. So my prompt poem is called Calls.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Calls. Winter drags on as the spring waits on. Here now and then gone now. The roads get spruced up or almost trued up to their skin from hiding under the sheen of the white covering about which everyone keeps bitching. So really, it's neither this way nor that way. That's only right to say, really. And we all know it's some time now and then. But stuck as we are, play the game, blaming something no one will question. Like who can argue against the roads being bad? Thus blaming the city will not make any sad. Election is another one no one would ever question if you choose to blame it on. And the calls this way or that way always keep you in their sway. Though you keep with the play, why does it shake you beyond your play when the sun goes up and down? Why it strums your strings when even an unknown bird sings, and you wake up to something and dive deep into another thing that you, only you, know to cling to. When you forget your name, when you get tired of the chase of the fame, and then your calling comes to go back into the sleep where the bell and ring all become one to sing, and the sparrows flock to find enough room in one pine and argue in their chatters, and you decide to shut yours because out there is the beauty you see, and you take the call.
Another beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing that. I love the chatters and shut yours. I mean, once you start rhyming, the fun and the joy of sounds emerge. It's really fun. Thanks for sharing that, Biz.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep, good night.
And I love that haiku, Katie, especially that one. I love both your haiku at the end, but that what is that, shattering the fourth wall? It just always rings in my head that I could have in a monocle, shattering the fourth wall and just ellipses and stars. That's all. It was such a beautiful and profound line there.
Oh,
that's
thanks.
beautiful.
Thanks. I feel like I missed a trick though, and instead of the M dash, it should actually be in ellipses. But I feel like ellipses are.
Perfect.
You think it's good? Okay, because I feel like ellipses
No,
are
it's
overused.
perfect.
Okay, good.
It's just
Added it.
you should allow me that freedom as a reader to make my own.
That's what I want to do. I don't want to be like, here are the stars.
Yes, I'm not suggesting. I'm saying in my head, I'm thinking when you read it today, not the first time. But
Right.
when you read it today, I don't know. Wow, this fourth one, I love that. I love something crazy, mystical. So
Aw.
and go to the stars. I mean, they're two extreme ends, right?
Oh, thank you. That's
Okay.
sweet.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Night.
Thanks so much, Biz. It's great to see you always. It's a bit of a miss you with calls. And next, let's go to, I think I saw Nivi here. So yeah, let's go to Nivi while she's on break. Hey, Nivi.
Hey Tim, hey Katie, how are you guys doing?
Hey.
We're great. Yeah, great to see you.
So my poem is definitely not about the eclipse because it was invisible to us here in India.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. If it were, it would probably be about the eclipse, isn't it?
So what did you write about?
Basically, what is a poem? What goes into the writing of a poem? What we first think of while writing a poem.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit difficult to have internal rhymes, but then I think it just flows. I mean, the rhythm it gives the poem is just something that's so special. So even though it was a bit challenging, I really loved it. Thanks for the prompt, Katie.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Let's hear it.
A poem. Within the quiet sanctuary of thought that brought forth the inspiration, a poet's hand weaves upon the page and leaves behind traces of ink and soul. Each word is a masterpiece, enabling the world to see the raw emotions in vibrant hues, giving clues to the poet's mood. It's a fact that during the act of writing a poem, the mundane becomes magical and the plain Jane turns extraordinary. But it's the melody of the lyrics that's remedy at its very best. Silence. Silence speaks volumes between the waltzing words, creating new words.
That's great. I love that ending. The silence speaking volumes between waltzing words. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Nivi.
Thank you. And great show, although I may have to catch the rest of it later.
Have a good day.
Yep, have a great day. See you later.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, that was Nivi Karthik with a poem. And next up, we will go to Mike Bales.
Good evening.
Hey, Mike.
It's unmiddleable. I don't want to say I got a good view of it. There's a get together a few blocks from the house, and work started right at 2, and I had to look at it a little bit from the parking lot for work. And
yeah, I think everybody got a great view of it but us. I thought the whole country was covered in clouds. That was my impression from
all the clouds we pulled.
I guess so.
We pulled to the woodlands.
I dared to look up a little once without and I mean quickly, without the glasses on, and looked like the clouds are kind of rainbowing, which I never saw before.
Oh, wow.
So they're shimmering. My poem is about the eclipse. It's trying to be round like the sun. It's got a little bit of internal rhyme and a little bit of alliteration. It's kind of how I'd feel about the eclipse, or maybe it has something to do with the folklore about eclipses. So it's called Reckoning.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
Gathered peers in a park peer through shadows cast at the disappearing sun through opaque lenses as the moon hides the brilliant face of light, while birds hide in brush. 2 hours pass, silent.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love the shape poem too, Mike. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. It was Mike Bales with Reckoning. Very cool. And next up is Brian O'Sullivan. Hey, Brian.
Hey.
Hey, I was afraid I was on mute or something. Yeah, so shockingly, I wrote about the eclipse, and I made it. I made it though a sort of crownish sequel to a sonnet about the blood moon that I did for a prompt poem back in November.
Oh, interesting. So a revision, so a double prompt, I guess. You're prompted for the
Well,
title.
it's more
I
like
see.
it's kind of not really a revision so much as it is like a sequel. Like as you would in a crown, I started with the last line of the previous one.
Oh, very cool. Okay,
I
let's
made it
hear
an epigraph, which feels incredibly pompous to use an epigraph as myself. For myself. Okay. The end of the world is still not the end of you and me. Still not the end of you and me. We laugh. Thank you for this laughter that prevails even when the whole world comes unglued. For my November prom poem, the end of the world is not the end of you and me. Even should this good world come unglued, and should an unruly moon invade the afternoon, And even if the sun should shun the sky, you'll find my mood as bright as St. Jude's heart becomes when his holy improbable art has eased the wretch's care and warded off despair. If you will spare a moment to take the air in our parking lot, don the dark glasses and turn your gaze with mine to heaven's spreading haze. Regard the sun like a honey bun with a neat bite taken out of it, and on this lazy afternoon celebrate the current of our days. Let's chart a path that's skewed for you and me, and where it runs, let's follow it as one, even though we do not know the path of the totality.
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah, nice. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. It's like my favorite form. I think. So I just love, when it's like free verse, you don't know where the rhyme's going to come. That, the unexpected nature of it. It's really fun to listen to.
Yeah, and it never feels like writing towards a rhyme. Like none of these have felt that way.
Yeah, they all feel very natural. Yeah. It's really fun. Yeah, we need to do more poems like this. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. And we're going to go next to Siobhan Brownlee. Because I just saw her face. I remembered it's like 3:30 a.m. in France.
Oh, wow.
So let's let her go to sleep. Hey, Siobhan, how you doing?
It's actually 4:15.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Because you're late.
Oh, well, thanks so much for staying up. Yeah.
It's perfectly fine. Yes, so my poem was inspired by some discussion last week when the guest was talking about putting the conscious aside. Mm-hmm. And then Katie was also talking about the flow state. It's called Trying or Not. I'm trying to be a poet, but am I lying to myself, or is it a matter of perseverance and persistence? They say you must go to a flow state, slay the control of the I, the conscience, let the poem roll. I hear about something called automatic writing. It's a means of connecting with the unseen, the creative unconscious, and the past lived. Enthusiastic, I will try this promising technique. So, sitting late at night, I repudiate the digital, take pen, notebook, then prop up my pillow. I dim the light, breathe and hold pen to page. Still, am I waiting for a miracle? Will I see coming a thing from the depths of me, or will my deceased mother release some gods of Greek mythology that she was wont to speak in her poetry? My pen begins to move, to be alive. I half see the words shape a landscape with a river trickling, rippling, wriggling, jiggling, that little by little comes to a fickle fiddling as my eyelids droop and sleep swoops in. The next morning, I look at my notebook in trepidation. I do not find an excavation of superb images plucked from unconscious ducts, nor are there traces of ethereal spirits' embraces. My handwriting is so bad that sadly much is undecipherable. What remains is a rain of pleasant ramblings, far from incandescent, a few mild insights, nothing that alights and could be grown in this week's poem, where 2 words need to rhyme in every line. In any case, is it possible to run this writing race if we restrain the conscious and simply let the ink think?
Oh,
that's great. Such a fun poem. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Next time I sit down and I don't know what to write, I'm just going to think I need to let the ink think.
That's great. Yeah, thanks so much, Siobhan. Yeah.
Yes, I thought that when I have to do rhyme, it's a very conscious thing. I'm looking up lists of rhyme, but at the same time, there's creativity and imagination, so they're kind of both working together. That's
why. Oh yeah, that's great. That's just wonderful. How it works. Yeah, really cool. And from now on, we'll give you the Nivy treatment. If we see anybody who I know that it's after midnight where they are, we'll try to get them early.
Yeah,
as early as possible.
Thanks very much, and I do have to go now, so I'll catch up later on. Catch up later on YouTube. Okay, goodbye,
good night.
Everybody.
Get some sleep. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Yeah, that was sweet. That was Siobhan Brownlee with Trying or Not. And Gwendolyn Soper is up next. Nice to see Gwen. Hey, how you doing?
Oh, I am doing well. I find myself getting teary. My poem is about depression, and I think I've just been cut off from people for a while. And so it's so amazing to just be with my community of fellow lovers. And it's just really good to see you all.
Oh, it's so great to see you too.
Good to see you too. Yeah.
So this poem is about depression, And I was a lazy ass and didn't give it a title, so I just said sonnet, so no title.
Well, I like that.
Sonnet, so no title is the title. That's great.
One, I'm going to clarify two things. So I grew up Mormon in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you just did not know people really who were not Mormon. Maybe 3 families in a 4-mile radius or something. So we called every person that was older than us brother or sister.
Okay.
If it's a married couple, it's brother and sister so-and-so. That's one clarification. The other is, I was super late to the party. I'm 62 years old, and I just learned about the Plato's allegory of the cave. And I thought, wow, I'm so smart. And I've been telling people about it, and everyone I tell has already heard about it. So I allude to this in this poem.
That's great.
Great, yeah.
All right. And yes, it's about the eclipse, but it's in a roundabout way. Sonnet, so no title. Over 1 month of darkness, so black my hand remained invisible. I saw no fingers twinkling in front of my face, no swiveling shadows on walls that seeped in this cave, where brother and sister Chamois once danced the mambo. No swiveling shadows of these undulating hoppers, as if trying to escape flames like Millie Donay could with Cuban Pete at the rare church dance in the gym, a short ways away from the chapel. Finally, today, after this month of darkness, the sun's revelation, its countenance, but then around noon, the damn moon got in the way, stole the spotlight, blocked the burner of doubting retinas, the giver of cancer of skin, the symbol for optimists, believers, its heat for sin.
That was a powerful poem. Thanks so
Very
much
powerful.
for sharing that. Yeah, thanks, Gwen.
And it's so wonderful to see you, Gwen. We've missed you.
Oh, thanks. It's good to be here. I just figure now that I don't worship a prophet, it's just like, well, maybe Calliope the Muse is my new prophet, and my top 10 favorite literary journals, or the top 12 are my new Quorum of the 12 Apostles.
I like that.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Great poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yep, you're welcome.
Yeah, that was Gwendolyn Soper with a sonnet, so no title. That's great. Jared Campbell is next.
Hello.
Hey, Jared.
Hi.
Yep. So mine was called 8 p.m. It's just taking a walk.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So 8 p.m. The blue above the gold and redness in the west is confident, as if it doesn't know the turning of the earth towards its rest is a turn away from light. The 3-part glow is dispossessed of splendor it was lent by shortness of the day. Colors give way to indigo. Another day is spent. We both love a transient display. Streetlight glare obscures the stars' breakthrough. We walk back east where one house and one bed will satisfy our need for one place where we feel decreased acuteness of the new. The dandelions hang their snowy heads and trust their futures to the chilly air.
Yeah, that is really cool. 8 p.m., Jared, and you have the rhyme scheme here, which is really interesting. Yeah. Did you come up with that ahead of time, or I mean, how did that develop? Yeah.
Just thinking about trying to get internal rhyme in every line, but disguising it a little bit by spreading it out toward so just ended up rhyming everything on the second foot as well as the fifth foot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting form. I think that's going to have to be called the Campbell.
Yeah, that's the Campbell.
The Campbell sonnet.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's not, yeah.
Yeah,
very cool. Oh, that's great. I love that, and love the form and where you went with it. Very technically skilled to get the poem into a form like that.
It was very limiting.
It doesn't feel limiting. It doesn't read limited at all.
That's the thing where it's amazing when you can pull off a poem that like it should be really limiting and then it doesn't feel that way at all. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. It was Jared Campbell with 8 p.m. And next we have Mark Grenier. Hey, Mark, you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Hello.
Clicking the wrong buttons.
I would be doing that too. I'm not in charge of any buttons, thank God.
That's true. Katie has a button-free existence.
Right now, at least when we're in the same room. Yeah.
Okay, I sent this to you on in the email, so as well as in Submittable.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've got here Spring Speaks, right, in Suburbia.
And it's actually a attack on 2 of your prompts, Katie.
Oh, nice.
Spring Speaks in Suburbia. Weed whackers whack on the edges of lawns all through me today as landscapers shape the new spring green growing things spawn, as they shape their leaves for it to a season's escape from gray winter days of cold wind and rain, freezing snow and the ice blows spatter. Hummingbirds, finches, and wrens return to rain over backyards stunned by the sun's bright scatter. Vernal plays of bright daylight and windy shade. They speak to me now of escaping the noise the bombs in Gaza make, the shaking parade of conflicts ignored as poets indulge in the equipoise of days and nights inside in their easy chairs, encouraging peace with despairing new airs.
Wonderful sonnet. Spring Speaks in Suburbia, fitting the spring theme and the internal rhyme.
Nicely
prompt.
done.
Very nicely
Expertly
done.
so, yes.
Which makes me wonder, Katie, do you give extra points if people do multiple prompts?
I can't help being impressed.
And then
I can't help it.
What if somebody did all 4 or 5 prompts in one poem?
I think I would just bow down at the screen.
Well, I think that sounds like a challenge for
That
Mark.
sounds terrifying, honestly.
But by the way, the interview with Bilgere was really great today, I thought.
Oh, thanks. Well, so glad you liked it, Mark.
Yeah.
Yep. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
It was Mark Grenier with Spring Speaks in Suburbia. Steve Horrell is next. A couple more people on the lines. Hey, Steve.
Hi there. I think I unmuted.
Yep.
You did.
Yep. Good to see you. How you doing?
Okay. Now, I have a little bit of a short explanation to do for this because this is a cheat. This prompt was a result, believe it or not, of the Sestina prompt. Although obviously it isn't anywhere near a Sestina.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I thought, well, I'll never do a Sestina. I'll try a Tritina. So I started reading all these poems that I really liked. And I never picked the words to do, but I fell asleep with these rhythms in my head. Like, even though I never could find my E.E. Cummings book, I fell asleep with "What if a much of a witch of a wind" rolling through my head, and anyone lived in a pretty how town with up so floating many bells down, and I fell asleep. And I got up in the morning and I just started writing, and I just wanted it to be. I didn't give a shit whether it rhymed or I was just trying to follow sound. And I did change a couple of words at the end, but so it's a very short poem, and I don't really like the title. I made it up later. So I think it's probably Poem Unnamed would be better.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to hear this. Go ahead.
Oh, well, it's, yeah. Anyway, so it's with apologies to E.E. Cummings. And, okay. She steepled her fingers. She wept her sighs. She did her dailies before she went awry. He gloried her stories. He kissed her eyes. He fingered her tenses, past, present, then gone. Spring, summer, fall is all. They still weep their remembers.
Oh, that's beautiful. They still weep their remembers. That is great, Steve. I love that.
I don't think you have to apologize to E. Cummings.
No, I don't think you do. I think you should say
I felt
thank
really.
you.
I looked at all the people up here that were reading, and I thought, "Oh, am I going to do this? Am I?"
Well, that's wonderful. I love the sounds.
And
of that.
by the way,
great lines.
on the West Coast, East Coast of Vancouver Island, but West Coast for most people. It was rainy. We were only supposed to get somewhere between 70 and 30%, occlusion of the sun. And I was working in the greenhouse, and I never noticed a thing. It was cloudy and crappy all day.
Yeah, well, right
so
here,
you should feel better for whatever happened to you.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't notice except we were out there with our little clock, waiting with our little glasses.
And the
that meant nothing.
Yeah, well, I had to check the time. I had to keep checking the time, going, oh, did I miss it? I'm in the middle of it. What?
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's how it fell here too. Well,
anyway,
thanks for sharing that, and thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, that was Steve Horrell with an untitled poem. We'll say thanks for sharing that, Steve. And next up, let's go to Chelsea McClellan.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Chelsea. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
So what do you got for us tonight?
I also wanted to play with I almost said Sistina, sonnet, and did not as complicated as Jared, in a good way, Jared. I feel like that came out as Jared.
No, it was a compliment. Don't worry. It sounded nice.
Anyway, I just did, I did rhyme with the end words. If it was A, it was B in the internal rhyme, etc.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great.
And for those of you in the Facebook group, I did share a short clip of my grandma singing. If you want to see her smile.
So that's a great and a great. How can people find the Facebook group? Because I want to see that too.
They should go. You don't have to find the Rattlecast prompt lines. You have to answer a couple membership questions, and maybe you too, Timothy Green, will be approved.
No, I am a moderator. I don't need to.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
But what's the prompt call? You Rattlecast?
The prompt lines.
Prompt lines, Rattlecast?
Yeah.
To search for
now
that?
I feel like I'm wrong. I don't know.
On the spot. Anyway,
Okay.
Well, let's hear this poem. And I can look forward to hearing your grandma sing too, but let's hear it.
Okay, it's called Mnemonics. With one black glass and one through which she sees, one husband finally at ease behind her, Grandma asks, politely insists that she pass the slotted spoon down to me. My first foray into 300-degree oil. Let me go back to Sunday morning donuts, after karaoke and dancing late on smoke-filled Saturdays, to the campground Grandpa showed us proudly. 10 years it took us, he says, by sweat and sun labor, each path cleared by hand and spade. It's only now I notice. Now, when Alzheimer's spade heaves each scoop of soil over her memory. Here, employing balloons to pass the time, the dying slowly finds. Here, where every eye can feel the joy of what she still knows. Her trembling voice singing, "Great is thy faithfulness compels me to write." And I wonder if I had rhymed more in my life, if I could tell you now which of her eyes was blind.
Oh, another beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Chelsea. I love especially the line, that each scoop of soil over her memory. That's such a great image for that. Thanks for sharing.
Really is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Mnemonics by Chelsea McClellan. A couple more poets left. Rob Harris. Hello, Rob.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, great. Yeah, great to see you.
Good. I don't mean to pile on with the eclipse stuff, but
that's all right. Everybody is, but that's fine. Oh, we got a photo too.
Cool kid wearing my bracelet from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where I went yesterday.
I saw that on TV.
Robin Roberts was there. Some other guy I didn't know, but yeah, they were there on the scene. I sent a picture of what it looked like. I took a panoramic during the totality. So if you want to check that. It's not the best quality, but I contorted myself into a circle doing panoramic. But that's kind of what George was talking about. So I have to tell you what the playlist was. It was amazing. It was the eclipse, the last song on the Dark Side of the Moon, where they said the sun is eclipsed by the moon. So you're looking at that,
Oh, wow.
and then
Yeah.
it goes away, and it was timed just perfectly.
Yeah.
So then you're in full totality, right? So they start to play Bill Withers' "Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone."
Yeah.
That's so great. Wow.
Exactly what was going on. And then when that was over, the totality was almost done. So they put on the Beatles' "Here Comes the Sun."
Yeah.
And then the sun was coming back as the song progressed. And so it was just 3 songs. They got it absolutely
that's
right.
really cool curation. Someone had fun
I
with
was
that.
watching that and listening to the music, and I was so jealous
Really?
to not be the person who got to choose that perfect music. It was so well done, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like, it was pretty amazing theming.
It was worth the 850 miles round trip that I had to drive to get there. So
Wow.
I'll
You
leave it at
definitely
that. And
go
I
around,
didn't
Rob.
try
every week you're some other
Somewhere
adventure.
else, yeah.
Well,
True,
I'm
living
gonna
the good life.
I'm gonna work this into a future poem down the road. I already had this week's written before this all happened, so it doesn't have anything to do with the eclipse. I just wanted to throw that in there. But I read your prompt, and it was internal line in every rhyme, or internal rhyme in every line. I said, I think I'll run with that. So mine is called "You Want Internal Rhyme in Every Line." It's just straight meter. I was letting my Hamilton flow go. My inner Edgar or inner Once Upon a Midnight Weary, as I pondered weekend weary, that sort of thing, midnight dreary. So here it goes. I apologize for the directness of it, but I could write 1,000 of these. It goes like this. You want internal rhyme in every line? That's a big ask, a Herculean task, a hard road to toe, hard road to hoe, a tough way to go, but it can be done. Might even be fun. So I'll give it a shot. Maybe you'll like it or not. Here's my best try, this one writing guy, putting words on a page with rhymes to engage. But folks on this call, I cherish you all. Your approval I'll ask for this rhyming task. I could keep on going, my words ever flowing, or maybe I'll quit and wrap up this shit to let someone else speak with their rhymes unique. Thanks for hearing me out. I've enjoyed it, no doubt.
Mic drop.
Very fun. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Quit shit.
If I had a mic, I would let it go.
Well, thanks. A real pleasure as always, Rob. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing it. I hope you have a good week.
Yep, you too. That was Rob Harris with "You Want Internal Rhyme in Every Line."
I think it's we're like, you want internal rhyme in every line. That's how
There you go. Well, we'll let Katie read the titles for now.
I was spitting them out, that's for sure.
Thanks, Rob. All right, so there's Rob Harris once again. And Mary Lisa D. Dominicius is here. Hey, Mary Lisa. Oh, you got to unmute.
Unmute. Okay.
There you go.
Yes, hi.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Katie. Hi. Okay, I'm gonna find it. I have to pull it up. Where did it go? All right. Okay. It's not an eclipse poem, but oh my gosh, it was so much fun, and I got such a rush out of this.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, that's what we want to hear for sure.
Yeah.
I was still writing it at 6:00, so.
Oh wow.
I had another poetry thing to be at 6, and at 6:00 it's only like 4 minutes away, but still, I was like, no, I have to finish this poem. So I might stumble. I don't know. Okay. Here we
we're
go.
looking forward to it. Go ahead.
Okay. Love memory time. All day swell slow with rain the night spills. And night spills accidental thoughts of love. And love I've lost, and love I've lost to death. Like light-starved moths that flock to each light lit, battering their ashy wings against whichever window glows bright. They follow me as I move through summer night from room to room. Tick-tock, tick beat the moth wings against the window. Tick-tock, tick flutters the second hand on the clock. Drip, plop the raindrops. Drop goes the heart. Throb, 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 mob the thoughts. Persistent as rock pelting glass. Ironic as the moths approaching my light all night, but gone by morning. As if light wasn't what they desired, merely flight, the mounting of air, the momentum of reaching. Like someone praying for rain and then seeking shelter, because the praying was what they were after, not the rain. or to rest in sleep without dream, to take fortune from luck without fame. From every good thing to claim only half of what's given, passion without friendship, love lacking passion, thought without action, reaction. No thing wholly itself, but a fraction reduced to arithmetic. Love, memory, time, each a meager smudge, a smeared iridescent moth wing lost to touch, but solid as the drub of my heart. They convince me something remains where absence might be. An addition for every subtraction, more than mere forward motion we have going back. Even as tick, tock, tick go the footsteps, the breath, the heart. Even if goodbye, goodbye whispers tick, tock, tick.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the repetition of that. Mary Lisa, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
Great ending.
Yeah. I
There
guess
was a lot
it was
right.
the clock came into play in the end with it, you having to finish it, I suppose, with the tick tock.
I had to bring it full circle somehow.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, well, thanks so much for
All
sharing
right.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
take
for
care.
the
Yep.
Good
Bye,
night.
Mary Lisa.
Bye.
Good night.
Yeah, there's Mary Lisa D. Dominicius with Love Memory Time. And last but not least, Lucy Chow. Hey, Lucy, how you doing tonight?
Hello.
Hey, Lucy. Are you there?
Thank you.
Hi. So what do you got for us?
I've sort of got a prompt poem, but I don't think in very strict sense. It's in the blues forms, which is a kind of like interlinear rhyming.
Well, that's interesting.
And there are a lot of like echoing sounds, but the internal rhyme is not that strict.
Oh, interesting. Well, let's hear it. Go ahead.
It's called Blue Berkeley Blues. Baby's blue eyes open to woodland skies, unclouded, leaf unshrouded skies, open to seaside gales, wild surprise. Pentamerous petaled periwinkle, emperine self-hued periwinkle, either's pure pyrrhic wheel twinkles. Stella hyacinth sisterhood of iris, silver and golden pollen azure iris. From verdant glossy ribbons rises. Rosemary, lavender, ceanothus thyme, blue incense scenting air of springtime. Earth and firmament echo and rhyme. Heaven's trellis weft with wisteria, unwistful waterfalls of wisteria. Played shade checkered fritillaria. Myosotis borage, stellar bellflower, butterfly pea, bog sage, dayflower. Morning glories, dawn dewy bower. Wind plowed, rain routed Nigella, feathery, feisty fisted Nigella, singing, swaying sapphire scintilla. All bright spectra of Berkeley skies, rainbow ravished sun showered skies, rest in anthocyan depth of eyes.
Oh, really interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. It was Blue Berkeley Blues. Makes you think we're going to have blues as a prompt at some point.
Yeah.
Some blues poems. Really interesting listing nature there, moving through the rhymes. Thanks for sharing that, Lucy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Good night.
Have a great night. It was Lucy Chow with Unblue Berkeley Blues. And that's going to wrap up. I think we're running late on time. There might be some more people, but I think we're just going to jump.
Yeah.
Because we have to do a bunch of stuff, pack and things like that. So,
yeah, we do.
Let's wrap it up, and we'll get to any extra poems next week, maybe. But now let's move on to the Sciku. That's the next step. And the Sciku was based on this article. This was from the University of Arizona. And I like the headline here, which caught my eye. How the moon... Here, hang on, let me fix this a little bit. How the moon turned itself inside out. And it's a story about... So there's a lot of titanium on the surface of the moon, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And so it's been sort of a mystery, and especially one side has a lot more than the other. That's why it glows so bright in the sky. Speaking of the moon, I thought it was a good eclipse type thing too. But anyway, see, all that glow, that brightness of the moon has to do with that. And it doesn't really make sense because it's such a heavy thing, so it would sink to the bottom. So why is it on the surface? Turns out that it was sort of a molten-y crust, according to this model and this theory, and sunk down while it was like molten-y. And then once the crust hardened, it like spit out as lava. So these like lava flows full of titanium dust. And that is what makes the moon. It's the moon sort of spitting itself inside out. So I was thinking about things moving inside out. You can see these sort of examples here in the graphics. I was thinking about that, and I came up with this Sciku for this week. After the gale, whizzed knock. After the gale, whizzed knock. There you go. That is your Sciku for the week. That is the show for the week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. A really fun episode. Wonderful prompt poems. And wonderful prompt lines winner. And
Nancy Beagle, yes.
Nancy
and then
Beagle.
I just wanted to mention really quickly, because I think it was one of our best episodes of the Poetry Space. We talked to Wendy Vitalock for episode 58, and we talked about the music, which feels very apropos with hearing all the beautiful music of the prompt poems tonight.
Yeah, great point. If you'd like to listen to that conversation with some regulars here, plus Wendy Vitalock.
The Poetry Space Squad, as we're calling it. Or
Space
I'm calling
Squad.
it, and nobody else is.
You can call it the squad.
The squad.
Yeah, so find the squad there on anywhere you get your podcast.
We
At
sound
Spotify.
like a militia.
Well, maybe it's the next step. Anyway, yeah, so find that on Amazon or Spotify or iTunes, which is the best one probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a lot of fun doing that episode, talking to Wendy with some great poems that she shared and some others shared as well.
It is rated explicit. That's all I'm going to say.
It is rated explicit.
It is
That's
rated
true.
explicit.
And this week on the Poetry Space, we're going to have a date night.
We are.
So find out what that is on Friday. That's when
right along with us, find out what.
Exactly. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's gonna be Friday's episode, so we'll see that then. Now next week's guest in the Rattlecast is. Wait, did we do that yet? No. Do we have to do the
prompt?
The prompt.
Yeah, the prompt.
So the prompt for this week is to. Here we go. This is next week's prompt.
Okay. So write a poem with a single word as the title, in which our understanding.
Oh shoot! Sorry.
Of that.
Okay, well, the screen got big.
World shifts by the end of the poem. That's funny because you're having to shift the text as you do it.
I don't know
and to be
what.
fair, too, I verbally told Tim the prompt in the kitchen earlier, and he wrote it down, so I didn't.
Yeah. So it's not all fitting on the screen. Hey, something we got.
It needs to shift.
Yeah, we got. Okay, here we go. Just barely squeeze it.
There we go.
I don't know why it like zoomed. So anyway, write a poem with a single word as the title, in which our understanding of that word shifts by the end of the poem. So we had palimpsest, we had the avocado, we had misting.
Yeah.
A lot of good examples from George. Something like that, and interesting if you can figure out, do you do the title before or after?
Right.
Is a good question.
I
too.
like to how so much of what you're talking about with George was his exploration of time, and I think using time as a medium to shift the meaning of something is clearly a very successful way that he often goes about it. So there are many different ways to do that, but I think the meaning should really deepen as well as expand and feel also a little bit different, ideally, with the single word simple title. A lot of them are nouns, but then there's also like misting, as an example too.
Yeah. Well, really cool prompt, Katie. Looking forward to doing that. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Kim Stafford. And we already mentioned this earlier, so it shouldn't be a surprise if you were paying close attention. Kim Stafford is returning. He was on the Rattlecast 2 years ago, has a new book, As the Sky Begins to Change. He also, we're interested in alternative publishing. We talked about how he posts his poems on social media and doesn't bother with literary magazines. He also published this as an audiobook with musical interludes between poems, which is really interesting too. And he was just one of the best guests we've had, so it's really fun to have him back a couple years later. And we're moving that episode to Tuesday too. This is not like a permanent thing, although we're playing with shifting the thing. But but I have a Little League game on Monday. It's the only Monday night game.
Your son has a little.
No. Well, I wish I was playing. in the Little League because
I don't
would
think
hit.
they're gonna put you in. I'm so
I would
sorry.
be like 5 for 5 with 5 home runs if I was. But anyway, no, I would also strike out every kid. But no, it's my son has a Little League game. I'm the coach.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to miss it. So
Right.
we're gonna move that up to Tuesday for the one Monday night Little League game, and then we'll be back to Mondays for a bit. That's going to be Rattlecast number 241, again with Kim Stafford. Your prompt poems with a single word as a title in which our understanding of the word shifts by the end of the poem. And that's going to be the Rattlecast for this week. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's been a lot of fun. Take care.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, Gwen.